Welcome to the Snoozy Scientist, where we calmly explore the mysteries of science, one sleepy yawn at a time. Tonight, we're slipping beneath the waves into a realm that feels as distant as another planet, a place where sunlight disappears forever after a few hundred meters, and where beyond 1,000, the world loses color, loses shadows, and loses every familiar edge we know. There is no horizon there, only darkness stretching in every direction, a darkness untouched by sunlight for millions of years, and the shapes life takes within it are unlike anything found on land. For millions of years, the deep ocean has acted as its own secret workshop, shaping creatures in ways that feel impossible. Down there, where temperatures drop above freezing and pressure builds to levels strong enough to crush steel, life doesn't vanish, it flourishes. Some creatures here create their own light, glowing softly like drifting stars. Some have no eyes, no pigment, or bodies that behave like liquid ribbons in the water. A few have no known relatives anywhere on Earth. Some were seen only once, caught briefly on camera before slipping back into the abyss. Scientists estimate that 91% of ocean species remain undiscovered, meaning the deep sea is not just unexplored, it is almost entirely unknown. Almost everything alive down there is still unknown, hidden in a darkness deeper than night. So, why does life change so dramatically the farther it sinks from the surface? What forces shape these bodies into forms that feel almost alien? And why do the deepest animals seem to bend the rules that every biology textbook teaches us? Tonight, we'll drift gently into that hidden universe. But before we begin, if you enjoy slow, soothing explorations like this one, calming journeys through the wonders of science, I'd be grateful if you gave this video a gentle like and perhaps tapped subscribe. It helps other curious minds find this peaceful little corner of the internet and lets the algorithm know that sleep and science go perfectly together. And if you'd be so kind, let me know in the comments, where are you winding down from tonight, and what time is it there? It's always a joy to see how far across the world this little sleepy corner of science travels. Now take a deep breath, and together let's begin our descent into the deep. When we leave the surface behind, the world begins to loosen its familiar shape. The light softens first, stretching itself thin as if unsure whether to follow us. Waves settle, colors fade, and the sounds of the living world slip quietly into the distance. The ocean opens beneath us like a slow, endless night, and every meter of descent begins to shape life in ways that feel patient and ancient. Near the surface is the bright and restless region many creatures know. Scientists often call it the light zone. Sunlight still reaches this place, warm enough to stir plankton into gentle blooms, and bright enough for fish to glide in shimmering trails. It is a world where sight matters and where color still has meaning. Here, the rules of survival resemble the ones we know from land. Bodies rely on speed or camouflage, fins cut through lit water, shadows fall like soft brushstrokes across reefs and drifting sand. But as we drift a little deeper, the edges begin to blur. The light thins until it becomes a faint blue wash, like the final glow of an evening sky. This is the twilight zone, a place where day never fully arrives. Shadows stretch without source, and everything grows quieter. The creatures here carry the memory of sunlight, but their world is already shaped by the first signs of deep ocean pressure, a constant slow weight that presses on every cell. Colors begin to disappear, not all at once, but gradually, as if the ocean is tucking them away for safekeeping. Still deeper, sunlight finally surrenders. What remains is the long and patient dark of the midnight zone. Every direction looks the same. Up and down become ideas rather than visible paths. Pressure builds steadily, a force so constant that bodies must learn to bend with it instead of resisting. Temperature drops until the cold feels ancient, a cold that does not bite but settles in place like stone. Here, even oxygen becomes a precious thread, drifting thinly through water that has not risen to the surface in many years. In this quiet world, life adapts in ways shaped by necessity rather than choice. Eyes, if present, grow large and sensitive, ready to gather the smallest glimmer of drifting light. Many creatures craft their own glow, small pulses of blue or green that float like wandering stars. Muscles soften, bones lighten, movements turn slow, almost dreamlike. Energy is treasure here, and wasting it is rarely forgiven by the deep. Below the midnight zone lies the abyss, a place that stretches across the majority of the seafloor. It is a calm and solemn landscape filled with vast plains of fine sediment that drift like pale dust. Temperature settles just above freezing. Pressure rises to levels that no land creature could survive. The darkness is unbroken, except for brief sparks of bioluminescent life, each flash a quiet announcement that something continues to endure. The water is heavy with age, having circulated slowly through the deep for longer than entire civilizations have existed. In this place, survival depends on patience. Food arrives rarely, often as remnants from far above, and so many animals move with deliberate care, conserving energy with each motion. And then, at the farthest reaches, the ocean opens into deep trenches. These narrow canyons cut into the crust of the earth itself. Pressure climbs to levels beyond imagination, tens of thousands of times heavier than the atmosphere at the surface. The darkness there is total, a darkness untouched even by the faint lights of the creatures above. Temperature remains low, oxygen remains scarce, and yet life still finds a way to bloom in quiet pockets along the fractured ground. Snailfish, delicate and pale, glide in slow arcs. Small crustaceans wander through an environment shaped more by geology than light. As we move through these zones, one truth becomes clear. Each layer of the ocean asks for a new kind of body, a new way of enduring. Light guides the rules near the surface. Pressure writes them deeper down. Temperature sharpens them. And oxygen scarcity shapes the final lines. Every creature that drifts or swims here has been sculpted by these forces over countless generations. The ocean is not simply a single world, it is many worlds stacked gently upon one another, each with its own quiet laws. Far below, in the deepest regions, the ocean begins to resemble space in its own shadowed way. Both realms are vast and cold. Both ask living things to adapt to extremes that seem impossible. Both contain mysteries held close, waiting for the rare moment when a traveler comes near. Yet, unlike the emptiness of the cosmos, the deep sea hums with life. It is quiet life, patient life, but life all the same. Life that has learned how to endure crushing weight and eternal dark. Life that moves slowly through an environment shaped by silence and time. As we continue our descent, the surface world feels farther away, not lost, but gently set aside. Down here, the ocean reveals itself layer by layer, each one a reminder that even in the most challenging places, life finds its own way forward, quietly and beautifully. As our descent continues, the water grows heavier around us, not in a threatening way, but in a way that reminds us how far we have drifted from the surface. The sunlight we once saw has long dissolved, and the soft glow from distant lives becomes our only gentle company. Down here, the rules of survival change. The creatures that swim in this dark, pressure-filled world look fragile at first glance, almost delicate, yet they endure forces that would crush any human body long before reaching these depths. The deeper we travel, the more we begin to understand that life in the ocean is not simply surviving. It is adapting with a calm patience shaped by the weight of entire oceans above it. One of the first beings we meet is the snailfish, a soft and pale creature often found in the deep trenches. It drifts with movements that seem almost weightless, its body shaped more like a ribbon than anything built for strength. It has no heavy armor and no thick bones. Instead, its form is flexible, filled with water, almost matching the density of the surrounding sea. This balance protects it from the crushing pressure that increases with every meter of depth. Rather than resisting the weight, the snailfish moves with it, letting the pressure pass through its body instead of pushing against it. Other deep animals follow a similar rule. Their bodies are shaped like soft envelopes rather than hard shells. Muscles are gentle, bones are reduced or absent, and tissues behave in ways that allow the pressure to settle evenly. What seems fragile becomes the perfect kind of strength. On the surface, we think of survival as a battle. Down here, survival is more like a slow dance with the environment, a way of allowing rather than fighting. In the darker stretches of the abyss, there are creatures like amphipods, tiny crustacean like beings that glide through the deep with surprising ease. Their bodies contain special molecules that keep their cell structures stable, protecting them from conditions that would tear apart a human cell. One of these molecules is called trimethylamine oxide, a compound that works almost like a gentle shield. It gives support to proteins and keeps them from folding under pressure. The deeper the animal lives, the more of this compound it carries, as if collecting little pieces of resilience over its lifetime. Even their membranes, the thin barriers that separate each cell from the surrounding world, are different. In humans, these membranes would become rigid and break under great pressure. But deep sea creatures keep their membranes soft and fluid, filled with fats that stay flexible even in cold temperatures near freezing. This softness is what keeps their cells from collapsing, letting the pressure slip through without causing harm. In some regions of the midnight zone, we find creatures with bodies so filled with water that they barely resist at all. Jelly-like animals float in slow spirals, their shapes changing with every gentle wave. Their bodies are almost entirely transparent, and every part of them moves in delicate harmony with their surroundings. They survive because their inner and outer pressures remain in a perfect balance, a quiet equilibrium that few surface creatures could ever achieve. Even animals with more structure, like certain deep-sea fish, carry unique adaptations. Their internal organs are spaced carefully. Their muscles are arranged to avoid being crushed. Their blood carries different salts and molecules that prevent damage. Many do not even have gas-filled spaces like swim bladders, since air pockets would collapse under pressure. Instead, they rely on oils or specialized tissues to maintain their stability. Some of the most quietly remarkable creatures are those that feed on the floors of deep trenches. These animals move slowly through fine sediments at depths far beyond the reach of sunlight. They swallow tiny particles and fallen fragments from far above, using energy with careful precision. They do not hurry, they do not waste. Their bodies are tuned to a world where food is scarce and pressure is constant, and every movement reflects that reality. The deep also holds animals that use their resilience in surprising ways. Certain worms live near hydrothermal vents, where pressure is immense and temperatures change quickly. Their cells tolerate extremes that would destroy most living things. Their proteins have evolved shapes that remain stable even when surrounding conditions shift. It is as if their biology has learned to breathe with the ocean's weight, expanding and settling in a rhythm that mirrors the earth itself. All these creatures show us something quietly remarkable. They do not survive in spite of the pressure. They survive because of it. Their bodies have become part of the deep sea, shaped over countless generations until they no longer fight the world around them. Instead, they fit into it like pieces of an ancient puzzle, each form created through patient adaptation. As we drift deeper into this dark and silent realm, we begin to understand that survival here is not about strength or resistance. It is about balance. It is about softness in the right places and resilience in others. It is about cells that bend instead of breaking, proteins that hold their shape, and bodies that have learned to live where pressure becomes a quiet and constant companion. The deep sea reveals that even in environments that seem impossible, life finds gentle and astonishing ways to endure. As we drift farther from the surface, the last traces of the world above melt into the water around us. The brightness that once danced across the waves begins to slip away, thinning with every gentle meter of descent. In the first few moments, the colors soften. Reds vanish first, swallowed quietly by the sea. Oranges follow, then yellows, each one fading, as if the ocean is slowly dimming the palette of daylight. By the time we sink past 200 meters, the sunlight has weakened to a long blue sigh, faint and strained. It pools in small pockets rather than illuminating the wide expanse. It is a light that no longer warms or reveals. Instead, it lingers like a distant memory, barely able to touch the water that curls around us. The ocean has already begun its transformation into a realm shaped by shadows and softness. Below this line, a silence fills the water, not the silence of stillness, but the silence of absence. No sun, no sunset, no sky. What light remains is scattered in thin threads, like the last remnants of twilight stretched impossibly far. This is the place where vision begins to shift, where eyes must learn to see differently, or abandon the idea of sight altogether. The world here is not defined by what sunlight shows, but by what the creatures themselves choose to reveal. In the gentle dark, something remarkable begins to appear. Small glimmers shimmer at the edge of our vision, tiny pulses that brighten and fade like drifting embers. One spark becomes two, then dozens, each one rising from living bodies rather than falling from the sky. It is here that the ocean unveils its other source of light, a light born not from a star, but from life itself, bioluminescence, a soft radiance woven from chemical reactions inside living cells. It fills the deep with a glow that feels ancient and patient. More than 3/4 of all deep ocean creatures create some form of this light. Some flicker briefly, like passing thoughts. Others shine steadily, their bodies carrying a calm and ghostly blue. Some erupt in short bursts that drift like sparks in slow water. The dark ocean becomes a quiet constellation of living stars. Different creatures use this light in different ways. Some use it to hunt. A small predator might carry a row of luminous organs along its belly, matching the faint light from above so it becomes invisible to prey below. Others dangle tiny glowing beads from long filaments, letting the gentle light attract curious animals close enough for a swift and effortless strike. Certain deep-sea fish have lights positioned beneath their eyes, almost like lanterns held close to the face. These lights reveal the shapes of small drifting creatures, allowing the fish to navigate and feed in a world where sight would otherwise be useless. For many species, bioluminescence becomes a way to hide. Some creatures release clouds of shimmering particles when threatened, a drifting smoke of light that confuses predators while the animal slips quietly into safety. Others coat themselves in light that matches the faint glow from above, masking their silhouette and allowing them to blend into a brightness that barely exists. Then there are those who use light to speak. Patterns of gentle flashes form messages across the darkness. Some lights pulse in steady rhythms, others flicker in delicate spirals. These signals travel across long stretches of water, functioning as quiet communication between distant bodies. They can call to a mate, warn of danger, or guide young through the shadowed waters. In a few rare cases, the deep reveals creatures that use bioluminescence in ways that seem almost otherworldly. Certain squid produce brief explosions of light that ripple along their arms, a display so bright it can momentarily stun a predator. Some shrimp release glowing clouds from their mouths, creating a burst of radiance that drifts like a sudden star igniting in the dark. There are also forms of trickery. Some predators imitate the gentle blinking patterns of harmless species, drawing unsuspecting animals close. Others mimic the soft glow of drifting plankton to mask their true shape. The deep sea rewards creativity, and bioluminescence becomes one of its most versatile tools. As we continue our slow journey downward, the surface light is now completely gone. The world is shaped instead by the quiet radiance of the creatures around us. Each point of light tells a story of survival in a realm where energy is precious and darkness is complete. The glow of bioluminescence becomes both a language and a lifeline, a way to communicate, to hunt, to hide, and to endure. The ocean at these depths feels like a sky turned inside out. Instead of stars hanging above, they drift beside us, rise beneath us, and fade in gentle spirals beyond view. Every flicker is alive, every glimmer belonging to an organism shaped by millions of years of deep water and endless night. Here, in the long quiet dark, life creates its own dawn. The deeper we drift, the more the dark feels like a living presence. It is gentle and complete, a soft curtain that wraps itself around everything. But within this calm darkness, light continues to bloom in ways the surface world never prepared us for. We have already seen the first glimmers of living light, small sparks drifting through the water like quiet stars. Now, as we sink farther along the slow path of the deep, those glimmers become more intricate. Light is no longer just a glow or a pulse, it becomes a tool, a lure, a shield, a language, and sometimes even a trick. In this place, light is survival. One of the most striking examples waits in the stillness of the midnight zone. A fish shaped by long ages of darkness floats in a patient silence, barely moving. Its body is shadowed, its motion sparse, but at the end of a thin filament, above its mouth, shines a soft bead of light. This is the anglerfish, a creature that has turned bioluminescence into one of the ocean's most elegant inventions. The light glows faintly, wavering like a tiny lantern in the water. Small animals, curious or hungry, drift toward it, mistaking it for some harmless drifting creature. The anglerfish waits, almost motionless, letting its lure sway gently with the water's rhythm. When an unsuspecting animal edges close enough, the anglerfish opens its jaws in a slow and practiced sweep. In one smooth motion, the glow that seemed so inviting becomes the last thing the smaller creature ever sees. This strategy works because light is rare here. Anything that glows becomes a point of interest. Yet the anglerfish does not simply imitate brightness. Its lure can move, it can flick, curl, and sway, mimicking the delicate motions of tiny deep sea life. A single drop of living light becomes the perfect illusion. Farther into the still dark, another kind of glowing adaptation appears. Some deep sea fish carry light organs arranged neatly beneath their eyes. These organs shine like small ghostly headlights that cut through the surrounding water. They illuminate shapes that would otherwise remain invisible, helping the fish find food or navigate the twisting paths of the deep sea floor. The light does not travel far. It forms a quiet halo around the fish, revealing only what it needs to see. These creatures have mastered the art of gentle illumination. They do not flood the water with brightness. They shape their light, keeping it soft so it becomes useful rather than conspicuous. In a world where anything that shines risks attracting unwanted attention, subtlety becomes a skill as important as the light itself. But not all bioluminescent strategies are subtle. Some are bold enough to turn the darkness into a momentary storm. Certain animals, especially small squid, release bursts of sudden brightness when threatened. These pulses spread through the water in a brilliant wave, dazzling predators long enough for the animal to escape. To human eyes, it might resemble a silent firework unfurling in slow motion. The predator, disoriented by the unexpected flash, hesitates. That pause, brief as it is, gives the smaller creature a chance to vanish back into the shadows. These flashes are sometimes called light bombs. They behave like underwater lightning that blooms from within a living body rather than from the sky. In a place where light rarely appears, this sudden eruption becomes a powerful tool. Other creatures, like certain deep sea shrimp, use a different method. Instead of emitting light from their bodies, they spit out luminous clouds of glowing particles. The cloud drifts like ink released into the water, except it shines with a blue-green glow. This glowing veil confuses predators, hides the shrimp's retreating shape, and creates a moving distraction that draws attention away from its true position. The shrimp's glowing cloud floats and twists in the water, a drifting miniature nebula. As it spreads, its light softens into gentle threads that slowly fade. The shrimp, long gone by then, leaves behind a shimmering reminder of the deep sea's most unexpected defenses. On some rare nights, when the water is calm and the creatures around us move in gentle harmony, we see bioluminescence used for something beyond hunting or hiding. Some animals pulse in slow rhythms to communicate with others of their kind. Their lights rise and fall like breaths, forming patterns that carry messages through the darkness. One soft glow might signal readiness to mate, another might mark a territory or call distant companions closer. These signals flow like music without sound, written entirely in light. Even the smallest creatures take part in this dance. Tiny plankton drift with faint glimmers that respond to movement around them. When something disturbs the water, they brighten for a moment before fading again. Entire clouds of them can shimmer at once, creating brief constellations that swirl through the deep like drifting galaxies. Every light we see carries a meaning, a lure for hunger, a shield of confusion, a silent voice, a guiding lantern, a warning, sometimes a trick. The deep sea, which seems at first like a place without light, becomes a world where life speaks in radiance. It is a quiet brightness that rises from within, shaped by patience, scarcity, and a need to survive without the sun. Each glow feels like a small act of defiance against the dark, not loud or forceful, but steady and ancient. Here, in this vast shadowed realm, light is no longer a gift from above. It is a creation from within, shaped by life itself, and every spark tells the story of creatures that have mastered the art of shining in the dark. As we drift deeper into the quiet regions where sunlight never arrives, the creatures around us begin to change in ways that feel dreamlike. The glow of bioluminescence still flickers through the dark, but now another kind of adaptation emerges, one shaped not by brightness, but by the desire to disappear. Down here, invisibility becomes one of the ocean's most elegant strategies. Where light is scarce and shadows are gentle, the best way to stay hidden is to leave nothing for predators or prey to see. Many of the animals in these depths look as though they are made of almost nothing at all. Their bodies soften into clarity, turning clear as glass until only the faintest outlines remain. This transparency is not merely a trick of color. It is a way of surviving in a world where every flicker or silhouette might reveal a presence that does not wish to be found. In shallow waters, color can help creatures blend with coral or sand. But color becomes useless once the ocean absorbs the comment, last threads of daylight. Down here, the only camouflage that matters is the absence of form. A transparent body allows water to pass through the gaze of another creature. Instead of standing out as a dark shape against the faint glow above, the animal becomes part of the water itself. Some of the most delicate creatures in these deep regions drift like sculptures carved from thin air. Their bodies are so clear that their organs float like small pieces suspended within invisible frames. Tiny comb jellies shimmer with faint rainbows along their edges, not from pigment but from light bending through their fragile forms. Their bodies curve and fold like liquid ribbons, catching and releasing the dim blue of the deep in gentle waves. They move without haste, letting the slow motion of the water guide their path. Other creatures take transparency even further. Certain species of larval fish, for example, drift with bodies so clear that only their eyes and faint lines of their digestive tracts can be seen. Their fins are thin sheets, almost invisible, and their movements cause barely a ripple. They float as though the ocean is carrying pieces of light rather than living beings. Deeper still, strange shapes appear. Glass squid, named for the clarity of their bodies, move with soft pulsing motions. The only opaque parts of their form are their eyes, which shine like small marbles suspended inside a perfectly clear shell. This transparency, combined with slow drifting motions, keeps them safe from predators moving above and below. One of the reasons this invisibility becomes possible is the way pressure shapes bodies at extreme depths. On the surface, creatures often rely on bones for structure, muscles for strength, and dense tissues for control. But the deep ocean applies a constant, crushing force that challenges these familiar forms. To survive, many animals abandon the structures that would collapse under such weight. Bones become smaller and softer. Some vanish altogether. Muscles lighten, losing bulk in favor of a gentle flexibility that allows the body to withstand the immense pressure without cracking or tearing. The deeper the creature lives, the more its shape begins to resemble the surrounding water. Instead of resisting the weight above, its form accepts it. Tissues become filled with water rather than air, reducing the risk of being crushed. Without rigid structures, the creature can let pressure press through it evenly, much like the way a soft cloth can be squeezed without breaking, while a rigid object might shatter. Some animals develop bodies so fluid that they seem to ripple even when they are still. Their forms shift with the ocean's movement, not fighting the currents but flowing with them. This liquidity gives them an advantage in the deep. A body that yields is far less likely to fail in an environment where pressure grows heavier with every passing meter. Even the internal structures change. Instead of firm skeletons, many deep-sea creatures rely on cartilage or delicate fibers that bend without resistance. These skeletal elements are lightweight, simple, and flexible. They offer just enough support for movement while avoiding the risks that come with dense, rigid bones. In some fish, even the skull becomes reduced, leaving the head soft and malleable. Organs float in gels or lightly supported chambers. Muscles, rather than being thick and powerful, stretch in long threads fitted for slow, energy-saving motions. A quick burst of speed is rare in the deep. Here, patience and quiet endurance matter far more. The result is a world filled with shapes that seem almost unreal. Some look like drifting glass lanterns. Others resemble thin sheets of water folding upon themselves. A few, like deep sea salps, form long chains of transparent bodies linked together, moving like a single creature even though each one lives its own separate life. They glide in elegant formations, soft clusters of living clarity, drifting through the dark. These adaptations remind us that survival in the deep is not about strength in the usual sense. It is about harmony with the environment. The creatures here do not stand out. They blend, soften, vanish. Their bodies are shaped by a world that rewards quiet invisibility and slow, fluid grace. In this shadowed realm, Transparency is more than camouflage. It is a way of becoming part of the deep itself, letting the darkness carry you, shape you, and protect you as you move through a world where even a silhouette can be a dangerous thing. As we drift deeper into the ocean's long night, the soft glow of living light slowly fades behind us. In this part of the deep, the water grows colder, the pressure steadier, and the silence more complete. It is a world shaped not only by darkness but by hunger. Food falls here in slow, unpredictable pieces, drifting downward from lives lived far above. Sometimes it arrives as tiny particles scattered through the water. Other times it comes as the remains of creatures that once swam near the sunlit surface. Nothing is wasted, and nothing is guaranteed. In this quiet scarcity, life has learned to survive through strategies that feel almost unbelievable. Every creature must be ready for long stretches of emptiness and the rare moments when food appears like a gift from the sky. To endure these conditions, deep-sea animals have adapted in ways that reshape the boundaries of what seems possible. One of the most striking examples swims in slow, gentle motions through the water. Its body looks soft and loose as though it barely holds itself together. This is a creature with an extraordinary adaptation, a stomach that can expand far beyond what its size suggests. When food is scarce, every opportunity matters. A meal may come only a few times in a long life, so the body must be ready to make the most of even a rare feast. Some deep-sea fish can stretch their stomachs to accommodate prey that would seem far too large for them. Their skin loosens, their ribs spread gently. Their bodies become flexible enough to carry a meal many times bigger than their usual size. This expansion is not frantic or violent. It is patient, designed for a slow and careful world. Other animals have taken a different path to survive the deep's unpredictable hunger. Instead of making their stomachs larger, they have shaped their jaws into extraordinary forms. Certain deep-sea species carry jaws that can open wider than their own bodies, unhinging in long, deliberate arcs. These jaws stretch with soft ligaments rather than rigid bones, allowing the creature to swallow prey nearly equal to its entire length. In the faint light of drifting bioluminescence, these jaws appear almost unreal. They open like dark doorways, allowing the fish to engulf creatures that would be impossible to eat in shallower waters. It is an adaptation born from scarcity. When food is so rare, the only rule is to eat whenever possible and to take whatever form that necessity demands. The gulper eel is one of the deep's most remarkable examples. Its mouth balloons outward, forming a shape nearly spherical when fully extended. The eel's body remains thin and ribbon-like, yet its head becomes a wide, pouch-like container. It can swallow fish, squid, and drifting animals larger than itself, storing food until its body slowly digests the precious meal. The eel moves with soft curves, carrying its entire feast inside its expanded head. Other creatures follow similar paths. Certain deep-sea fish have tooth, hinged skulls that lift like doors, revealing cavernous mouths lined with small, inward-facing teeth. These teeth do not tear. Instead, they act like tiny gates that prevent prey from slipping away once caught. When a rare meal drifts near, the fish opens its mouth and draws in as much water and prey as it can, letting the deep's quiet currents do half the work. Even animals without large jaws or expandable bodies have found ways to thrive in this starved world. Some deep-sea worms extend long, feathery appendages to capture falling particles. They live on almost invisible scraps. Over long stretches of time, they gather tiny fragments of organic matter, turning each drifting piece into a small victory. Scavengers roam the seafloor, with senses tuned to detect the faintest hint of decay, A whale carcass that sinks from the surface becomes an oasis that can feed a community for decades. When such a massive gift arrives, the deep sea comes alive with movement. Crabs, worms, fish, and nearly invisible scavengers gather around the feast. Some species have evolved specifically to live on these sunken remains, feeding on bone, fat, and tissue long after the soft flesh has vanished. These extreme feeding strategies rise from one simple truth. In a world where food is scarce, survival belongs to those who can wait, adapt, or transform their bodies into shapes that accept whatever the deep offers. Muscles shift, jaws widen, stomachs stretch, bodies evolve into forms that seem impossible on the surface. In these depths, the ocean does not provide often, but when it does, life responds with remarkable creativity. And so the creatures here continue to endure, shaped slowly by hunger into forms that are both extraordinary and perfectly suited to the quiet, starved world they call home. As we glide farther into the quiet depths, the world around us shifts once more. The water settles into stillness, the shadows thicken, and the faint glimmers of living light rise and fall like distant embers. In this hushed expanse, the animals that drift into view begin to take on shapes and sizes that feel almost unreal. Some are delicate and nearly invisible, shaped by the need to disappear. Others, however, are astonishingly large, as if the deep has stretched them gently over time. This is the realm of deep-sea gigantism, a place where creatures grow far larger than their shallow water relatives. It is a quiet mystery that has puzzled scientists for many years, and yet the deep continues to reveal new giants with every discovery. One of the first to appear is the giant isopod. It crawls slowly across the seafloor, moving with the calm patience of an animal that has never needed to hurry. Its body resembles the small pillbugs we see on land, but here, in the cold stillness of the deep, it grows to the size of a small dog. Its many legs ripple softly beneath it, and its armored plates shine with a pale glow where faint light touches them. Despite its size, the isopod's movements remain gentle, as if the weight of the water itself cradles each step. Nearby, another creature drifts upward from the dark below. This one is a colossal squid, a being rarely seen by humans. Its arms stretch outward in long, graceful lines, and its vast eyes, among the largest in the animal kingdom, seem to hold quiet reflections of the darkness around it. These eyes allow the squid to sense even the faintest movement in a world where light barely exists. Its body can reach lengths greater than many small boats, yet it moves with a slow and careful rhythm, using as little energy as possible in these cold waters. Even the smallest creatures of the shallows can become giants here. Tiny amphipods, which near the surface look like small, fragile shrimp, grow to surprising sizes in the deep, sometimes as large as a hamster. They swim with surprising strength, their elongated bodies flickering with swift motions before slowing again into drifting calm. At first glance, gigantism in the deep seems puzzling. Food is scarce, temperatures are cold, and energy must be used sparingly. Why would any creature grow so large in a place that offers so little? Yet the deep sea reveals its secrets, not through sudden answers, but through slow observations. One theory suggests that the cold temperatures play a part. Cold slows metabolism, allowing animals to use their energy more efficiently. A larger body can store more nutrients and survive longer during periods when food may not appear for weeks or even months. In this sense, size becomes a quiet reservoir of safety, a way of living patiently in an environment where patience is one of the only guarantees. Another idea is that pressure influences size. High pressure, can shape biological systems in ways that allow larger forms to function more effectively. In these depths, a bigger body can also move more steadily through dense water, with each slow movement carrying the creature farther than a small body could manage. It is not speed that matters here, but endurance, and a large form can glide through the water with quiet efficiency. There is also the matter of dissolved oxygen. Cold water can hold more oxygen than warm water, meaning the deep sea offers a richer supply, even if it is spread thin across vast distances. With more oxygen available, animals may grow larger without straining their bodies. Their cells can take in what they need, even in the cold and dark. For scavengers like the giant isopod, size becomes a tool for survival. A larger body means a larger stomach, and when food does arrive, they can store more of it. This allows them to endure long stretches of hunger. Some giant isopods have been known to go many weeks without a meal, their bodies sustaining themselves on slow reserves. In predators like the colossal squid, size becomes a way to navigate the deep's vast distances. The ocean floor stretches across enormous plains, and a larger body can cover those distances with fewer movements. It also gives the squid an advantage when facing its own predators, such as the deep-diving sperm whale. The battles between these two giants leave marks, long circular scars on the skin of whales, reminders of encounters that happen in silence far below the reach of sunlight. Even the giant amphipods reveal how size can be efficient here. Their larger bodies allow them to travel farther across the deep, searching for food or shelter amid the fine sediment. With long limbs and strong muscles, they can navigate currents and settle quickly when needed. As we float among these immense creatures, it becomes clear that the deep sea gently encourages forms that can endure cold, pressure, and long stretches of hunger. Being larger is not a sign of excess, it is a sign of adaptation. The giants of the deep are shaped by patience, by scarcity, and by the slow-moving world around them. The deep sea holds no rush. Time stretches long here, and life stretches right along with it. The deep sea holds many giants, creatures grown large in the quiet cold. Yet as we continue drifting through this vast and patient world, another pattern begins to appear, one shaped not by expansion but by reduction. For every enormous squid or broad, armored isopod, there are countless tiny beings that move with the soft rhythm of drifting particles. They are easy to overlook, so small they could rest on the tip of a fingernail, yet they carry entire worlds within their delicate forms. In the deep, where food arrives slowly and unpredictably, becoming small can be its own form of survival. A miniature body needs fewer resources, fewer calories, and less energy to keep itself alive. In an environment where long stretches of hunger are a quiet certainty, shrinking becomes a kind of quiet wisdom. It allows life to continue in places where larger creatures would not have enough to sustain themselves. Some of these tiny beings float gently through the water column, held up by the same faint currents that carry drifting snow-like particles from the surface. Their bodies shimmer softly, not from pigment, but from the way their thin tissues bend the sparse light that reaches them. Many of them are nearly transparent, shaped by the same forces that molded the clear creatures we encountered earlier, but on a much smaller scale. Their invisibility helps protect them from predators, while their small size helps them survive in a place where meals are few. Among these miniature forms are small copepods, creatures only a few millimeters in length. They move with quick, darting motions, as if each moment is a delicate balancing act between energy spent and energy saved. In the deep, they become one of the most abundant forms of life, quietly sustaining countless predators that rely on their steady presence. Each copepod carries tiny feathery limbs that guide it through the dark, dancing in slow spirals when the surrounding water calms. Other tiny beings include amphipods, distant relatives of the massive forms that stride across the deep sea floor. While some amphipods have grown to surprising sizes in the deep trenches, many remain small, their bodies shaped by scarcity rather than abundance. These miniature amphipods graze on fragments of organic material, slipping silently between grains of sediment, their tiny legs working with delicate precision. They live in a world measured in millimeters, a world where every particle becomes a landscape and every ripple becomes a current strong enough to carry them far from where they began. But the deep sea holds not only tiny grazers, it also hides microscopic predators, creatures so small they seem almost impossibly delicate, yet they possess strategies that rival those of much larger hunters. Some carry sharp, needle-like appendages for capturing prey. Others drift in silence until a movement or chemical trace reveals the presence of a nearby meal. They rely on patience rather than speed, using the stillness of the deep to mask their presence. These microscopic predators feed on organisms even smaller than themselves. They move through a universe of floating cells, tiny larvae, and drifting microbial life. From the perspective of these tiny hunters, each drop of water is a vast and intricate world filled with opportunities and threats. Their senses are tuned to the faintest cues, subtle chemical signals that drift through the water like invisible trails. There are also microscopic giants, organisms that, on a scale measured in single cells, grow to astonishing sizes. Some single-celled protists reach sizes larger than grains of sand, forming elaborate shells or delicate nets that extend far beyond their own bodies. These structures help them capture food or stay afloat in a water column where sinking too quickly could lead to a silent burial on the seafloor. Their bodies may be simple, but their adaptations are quietly inventive. One group of these microscopic giants, the xenophyophores, form intricate, branching shapes that drift across the deep sea floor like fragile snowflakes. They build their delicate frames from particles around them, binding the tiny fragments into complex forms. These structures provide shelter not only for the organism itself, but also for even smaller creatures that take refuge among its folds. In this way, a single microscopic giant becomes a habitat, a living landscape on a world of mud and darkness. There are also tiny worms, scarcely thicker than a strand of hair, that move through the sediments with slow, twisting motions. They feed on microorganisms and organic particles, creating small tunnels as they travel. These tunnels allow oxygen to enter the seafloor, supporting entire hidden ecosystems that would not survive without these nearly invisible builders. In the spaces between grains of sand, microscopic crustaceans glide through miniature currents, their antennae sweeping gently as they explore. They find tiny traces of food, fragments no larger than dust, and turn them into the fuel they need to continue their quiet journeys. As we observe these miniature monsters, it becomes clear that shrinking is not a limitation. It is a response to a world where energy is precious and where survival depends on using as little as possible to endure the long night of the deep. In these small bodies, life has found a way to thrive by minimizing its needs, by becoming efficient, and by existing quietly in a place shaped by scarcity. Here, in this vast and shadowed expanse, the smallest creatures carry some of the most elegant strategies. They reveal that to survive in the deep, life can become as large as a drifting giant or as tiny as a glimmer of dust, each form shaped by the same patient ocean that holds them all. As we continue drifting along the ocean's quiet descent, the water around us begins to change once more. The darkness we have grown familiar with softens into something different, not brighter, but filled with a hushed sort of movement. This is the twilight zone, a realm suspended between light and dark, where day never fully arrives and night never truly leaves. It is a band of water that circles the entire planet, stretching far wider than any forest or desert, and within it, one of Earth's greatest migrations unfolds in silence every single day. The surface world has migrations we can see. Wildebeest thunder across plains. Birds trace long arcs across continents. But the deep sea hides a journey far larger than all of these combined. Billions of creatures, from the smallest drifting plankton to schools of lanternfish, rise and fall through the water column in a slow rhythm tied to the turning of the planet. This vertical movement is so immense that sonar once mistook the migrating animals for the seafloor itself, a false bottom that seemed to lift and sink with the passing of day and night. When sonar beams were first sent into the ocean during the early 20th century, the returning signals showed something unexpected. Instead of a single steady reflection from the true seafloor, the instruments recorded a wide, echoing band that shifted upward during the evening and sank downward with the coming morning. Scientists called it the deep scattering layer, a name that captured its mysterious, drifting nature. At the time, they could not imagine that this moving layer was made of countless living bodies. Only later did they realize that the false ocean floor was alive. As dusk begins to fall at the surface, faint signals of dimming light travel downward, reaching into the twilight zone with a gentle slowness. For the creatures waiting far below, this change is a cue. It means safety. It means the cover of darkness will soon be thick enough to hide their ascent. Slowly at first, then in great shimmering waves, the inhabitants of the twilight zone begin to rise. Lanternfish lift themselves upward in unhurried strokes, their bodies covered in tiny points of bioluminescence that flicker softly as they move. Shrimp-like creatures drift toward the surface in long, spiraling currents. Plankton, in numbers too vast to count, form delicate trails of movement that drift like underwater weather patterns. Even small squid join the journey, sweeping upward on graceful pulses of motion. For many of these animals, the reason for this nightly ascent is simple. The surface layer, though still dim under moonlight, contains more food. Tiny drifting algae and other microscopic life linger there, forming rich feeding grounds that would be dangerous to visit during the bright hours of the day. By traveling upward only under the protection of night, the creatures avoid the sharp eyes of predators who use sunlight to hunt. This nightly migration carries life hundreds of meters upward and then down again, a rhythmic breathing of the ocean itself. The rising begins just as the last faint traces of daylight fade. The sinking begins the moment the first hint of dawn appears far above, and the entire movement spans an unimaginable number of bodies. Imagine particles of dust lifted by a breeze. Now imagine those particles are living beings, each one moving of its own accord. The twilight zone becomes a world filled with this drifting motion, a place where the sea is never still. As dawn approaches, a whisper of brightness begins to filter down through the water. It is pale and thin, not strong enough to illuminate shapes, but strong enough to warn the creatures that their time near the surface is ending. One by one, they begin to return to the deep. The lanternfish turn downward. The plankton drift back into shadowed waters. Shrimp and squid fold themselves into the safety below. The migration reverses with a slow, steady grace. By the time the sun has risen well above the horizon, the twilight zone settles into its daytime quiet. The creatures that filled the upper waters only hours before now rest deeper, each one conserving energy in the cool stillness. The deep scattering layer sinks with them, slipping beyond the reach of sonar as if it never existed. It is a daily cycle older than human history, repeated without pause through every season and every year. The ocean has been breathing this way for millions of years, lifting life upward with the fall of night and lowering it again at sunrise. Few migrations on Earth can match its scale or its persistence. Moving through the twilight zone, it becomes clear that this realm between light and dark is not empty at all. It is one of the busiest places on the planet, filled with a gentle rising and falling that shapes entire ecosystems. And though this movement remains hidden from the surface, it is one of the ocean's most important rhythms, guiding the flow of energy from top to bottom, from one world into another. Here, where the water is neither bright nor completely dark, life moves in quiet harmony with the turning of the earth. As we descend past the twilight zone, the last threads of fading light dissolve above us. What remains is a darkness so complete that it no longer feels like the absence of light, but like a gentle world shaped entirely by shadow. This is the midnight zone, a realm where the sun has no presence and where life must navigate through a quiet, endless night. In this deep, still water, sight becomes something different from what we know on the surface. Where humans would find only darkness, the creatures here have developed eyes that turn the faintest glimmers into meaning. Each species carries its own answer to the question of how to see in a world where light barely exists. Some eyes stretch into long tubes, others gleam with mirrored surfaces, some lift toward the thin shimmer above, and some have abandoned the idea of vision entirely, letting darkness shape their bodies into new forms. The first creatures we encounter carry eyes that look almost otherworldly. Their eyes rise from their time, heads like long, delicate towers, shaped like narrow tubes that point upward toward the faintest glow drifting down from far above. These tubular eyes act almost like telescopes. They gather small traces of light that scatter through the water, focusing them into signals the animal can use. A tiny sparkle from a drifting creature, a soft flash of bioluminescence, or even the faintest scattered moonlight can become enough to outline a shape or reveal a moment of movement. These tubular eyes seem almost too delicate for the deep, yet they are perfectly suited to a world where looking upward can mean the difference between finding food and drifting hungry through the black water. Other creatures carry eyes that shine like polished silver. These mirrored eyes reflect light internally, bouncing it through layers of tissue before sending signals to the brain. By guiding the little light that exists along mirrored surfaces, the eye can gather more than it could through simple lenses alone. It is a quiet form of amplification, turning scattered photons into something meaningful. Some fish with mirrored eyes can see both upward and downward at the same time. One part of the eye focuses on the dim region above, watching for silhouettes of drifting prey. Another part directs its attention below, catching the faint glow of bioluminescent flashes from animals moving beneath it. These creatures live in a world where danger and opportunity can come from any direction, and their eyes reflect that truth. A few animals in the midnight zone have developed eyes that remain fixed in an upward gaze. These eyes are large, round, and filled with sensitive cells that respond to the slightest glimmer. They watch for the outline of food drifting down from higher waters. A small shadow or the faint pulse of light from above becomes a guiding signal. These upward-facing eyes do not search the darkness around them. They search for the suggestions of shapes, the edges of silhouettes, and the barely visible disturbances created by animals moving through the water above. The midnight zone becomes a place where seeing is more than simply capturing light. It is the art of interpreting faint suggestions. These creatures view the world through glimmers, hints, and soft distortions. They see where we would see nothing at all. Yet, in this deep realm, not every creature relies on vision. Some have chosen a different path. For many animals, eyes become unnecessary. They shrink over generations, growing smaller until they vanish entirely beneath layers of skin. Blindness here is not a weakness. It is a form of perfect adaptation. In complete darkness, eyes become costly. They require energy to grow and maintain. They must be protected, and if there is no light to see, they serve no purpose. So some species, like certain deep-sea fish and cave dwellers of the underwater world, redirect that energy to other senses. Their bodies develop heightened sensitivity to vibration. They learn to read the water around them like a language. Small currents reveal the presence of nearby animals. Chemical cues drift through the darkness, offering information sight could never provide. One blind species, a small eel-like fish with smooth, pale skin, navigates by the faint movement of water across its body. It senses the slightest pressure changes, a predator approaching from behind or a tiny organism drifting nearby becomes detectable without the need for eyes. In these dark waters, touch, vibration, and chemical signals become a different form of sight. Some deep-sea shrimp and worms do the same. They stretch their antennae outward like long, delicate branches, reading every movement around them. Their blindness frees them from relying on a sense that would offer them nothing in this realm. The midnight zone teaches us that vision is not a single solution, but a spectrum of possibilities. Some animals shape their eyes into instruments capable of gathering the faintest glimmers. Others reflect and magnify the little light that exists. And still others leave eyes behind altogether, embracing a darkness that becomes familiar rather than threatening. In this quiet world, sight becomes a mosaic of adaptations, each one shaped by the deep's patient hand. Here, in the heart of Earth's longest night, eyes evolve into miracles, and blindness becomes its own quiet form of clarity. As we sink beyond the midnight zone, the water grows colder, the pressure thicker, and the silence deeper than anything we have felt so far. The faint glow of drifting bioluminescence slowly thins until only a handful of glimmers remain. Soon even those vanish, leaving a darkness so steady it feels almost ancient, as if this part of the ocean has been waiting quietly for ages without disturbance. This is the beginning of the abyssal plains, a world spread across thousands of meters of depth. Here, the ocean floor stretches outward in vast, silent deserts made of soft mud. These plains form one of the largest landscapes on our planet, wider than continents, yet almost entirely hidden beneath the weight of the sea. The sediment is fine and pale, built slowly from countless particles drifting down from waters far above. It accumulates grain by grain, creating a smooth and endless floor that seems untouched by time. The abyssal plains feel still, but they are not empty. Life continues. Here, with a patience shaped by the deep, creatures move in slow, deliberate motions, conserving every bit of energy. The cold water, barely above freezing, slows everything. Muscles soften, metabolisms quiet, and rhythms of life stretch into long, gentle cycles. The first thing we notice is the snow. It is not snow made of ice or frost, but a quiet rain of organic particles drifting from the distant surface. Scientists call it marine snow. Tiny fragments of dead plankton, shed scales, delicate filaments, and the soft remains of creatures that lived closer to the light. It falls through the water column in long, slow spirals, taking weeks or even months to reach the seafloor. Each particle is small, yet over time, these tiny pieces become the main source of food for the creatures that call the abyss home. Some animals wait patiently on the seafloor, letting this snow settle around them. They sift through it with feathery appendages or brush it gently into their mouths. These scavengers have learned to survive on little, and their bodies reflect the reality of their world. They move slowly, often gliding across the mud without disturbing the fine sediment. Their shapes are soft and simple, designed to conserve energy in a place where meals are small and rare. A type of sea cucumber, pale and nearly translucent, drifts along the seafloor using small tube-like feet. It gathers marine snow by sweeping the sediment into its mouth, digesting what nutrition it can before moving on. Sea cucumbers in the abyss live unhurried lives, eating quietly and drifting in slow arcs across the soft mud. Their rhythms match the deep itself. Nearby, brittle stars lie in gentle clusters, their long arms stretching outward like delicate spokes on a wheel. They sense the slightest movement in the water, reaching out to catch drifting particles or small organisms settling from above. Their bodies are thin and flexible, built for the stillness of the abyss where sudden motion offers no advantage. Small scavenging fish, often with soft fanned fins, move just above the mud. Their bodies blend into the pale seafloor, allowing them to approach food without startling other creatures. Each movement is measured, each flick of a fin quiet and efficient. They eat what they can find, sometimes feeding on bits of decayed organisms that have drifted for months to reach this depth. Crabs wander the plains as well. Their legs leave faint trails in the sediment, lines that can remain there for days before the gentle currents erase them. These crabs do not scurry as their shallow water relatives might. Instead, they walk with slow, rhythmic motions, feeling through the dark for anything edible. A fallen piece of jellyfish, a tiny carcass, or even a clump of drifting detritus becomes a valuable find. Every creature here has adapted to life without change. The abyssal plains do not shift with seasons. There is no sunrise or sunset. The temperature barely fluctuates. The currents flow, softly and predictably. Life moves at a pace almost unimaginable from the surface world. Some animals, like certain deep sea worms, bury themselves in the mud and emerge only occasionally. Their bodies are long and slender, fitting easily into the fine sediment. They feed on whatever organic matter passes their way, living in narrow tunnels that remain stable for long stretches of time. Others drift just above the plains, their bodies shaped by buoyancy rather than muscle. Some species of jelly-like creatures pulse weakly as they swim only centimeters above the ground. Their long tentacles trail behind them, gathering nutrients from the falling snow. In this dark, calm world, survival depends on patience. The creatures here wait. They drift, they conserve. They allow the deep to move around them. There is no rush, no urgency. The abyssal plains offer little, yet life continues through quiet endurance. The darkness is complete, but it is not empty. It holds the traces of lives moving, slowly through time, each one shaped by the same long, still silence that blankets this deep and ancient plain. As we leave the vast calm of the abyssal plains behind, the seafloor begins to bend and dip into narrow fractures. These descents are slow at first, gentle folds carved into the crust of the planet. But with every meter we sink, the world reshapes itself into something far more dramatic. The ground drops away into enormous chasms, deep cuts in Earth's surface that plunge far beyond the rest of the ocean. These are the Hadal Trenches, places named after Hades, the mythic realm of the underworld. Yet what we find here is not a world of death, but one of remarkable resilience. The trenches stretch downward to depths greater than 8,000 meters, and in some places close to 11,000. Here, pressure grows so immense that numbers begin to feel abstract. Water presses upon every surface with a force that would crush metal and flatten anything built on land. The cold settles into a steady, unchanging presence. Light has long been left behind, even marine snow, which drifts so patiently toward the abyssal plains, becomes sparse. Most particles are consumed before ever reaching this far. What remains at these depths is a world shaped by extreme isolation, where only the most adaptable creatures survive. One of the most surprising forms of life thrives near the very bottom of these trenches. The snailfish, a creature with a soft, delicate body, moves slowly across the silty ground. Its shape appears fragile, almost translucent, as if it could dissolve into the water at any moment. Yet this fish is one of the deepest living vertebrates known on Earth. It has been recorded at depths beyond 8,000 meters, swimming calmly where few other animals dare to exist. Its body is filled with water rather than air pockets, allowing the weight of the ocean to pass through it without harm. Its bones are reduced, its muscles softened, and its skin seems to float over its shape like a thin veil. The snailfish glides with gentle movements, unhurried, as if the surrounding pressure has taught it a slower rhythm. Its presence here reveals something astonishing. Even in a world shaped by crushing force, life can find a way to flourish with grace rather than resistance. Nearby, amphipods scuttle and swim with surprising energy. These small crustacean-like creatures live at many depths, but the hadal trenches host some of their most resilient forms. Their bodies, small and light, contain special molecules that keep their cells from collapsing. These molecules help proteins maintain their structure even under intense pressure, allowing the amphipods to survive where human-built machines often struggle. Some amphipods grow larger in the trenches than they do in shallower waters. Their clear or faintly colored bodies drift and dart across the seafloor. They feed on whatever organic matter they can find, including the few fragments of marine snow that reach these depths or the occasional larger object that falls from far above. A piece of decaying algae, a scrap of tissue, or even the soft remains of a jellyfish can support them for days. In this world of scarcity, nothing is wasted. Life in the hadal trenches is defined by isolation. These deep rifts are separated from each other by thousands of kilometers. Each trench forms a kind of island, one that stretches vertically instead of across open water. Species within a trench evolve separately from those in neighboring trenches, shaped by the unique conditions of their isolated homes. Over long stretches of time, this isolation can create entirely new forms of life that exist nowhere else on Earth. These unique ecosystems may go millions of years without major changes. The temperature remains steady, the pressure unchanging, and the darkness complete. Even earthquakes and shifting plates, which helped shape the trenches, affect life here only occasionally. Most of the time, the hadal world moves at a pace measured not in days or seasons, but in geological stillness. Some creatures live partway up the trench walls, clinging to steep slopes made of crumbling sediment. They sift through the particles that drift down the incline or feed on microbial films that grow in thin patches. Others move freely along the bottom, exploring the long valleys that lie deeper than the height of many of Earth's tallest mountains. Microbial life thrives in ways that seem almost impossible. Some microbes draw energy from the chemical reactions that occur in the sediment rather than from sunlight or drifting particles. They live slowly, dividing infrequently, surviving in environments where food is nearly absent. The patience of these microorganisms shapes the very foundation of the hadal ecosystem. As we drift near the bottom of one of these deep trenches, the stillness feels enormous. The water barely moves. The mud is soft, undisturbed by waves or storms. The creatures here do not hurry. They have adapted to a world where change comes slowly and where survival relies on flexibility, simplicity, and the ability to endure solitude. The hadal trenches remind us that life can take hold even in places that seem inhospitable. Down here, in the coldest, darkest, quietest corners of the ocean, Earth still finds ways to create, to grow, and to persist. As we drift away from the silent trenches and rise gently into a region where shadows widen and the water feels a little less still, the deep reveals a different kind of wonder. Here, where darkness has shaped life for countless ages, bodies have taken forms that seem almost impossible. Nothing in the sunlit world prepares us for the shapes that appear in this place. They are quiet, strange, and beautiful in ways that feel entirely unique to the deep. The creatures we encounter now do not simply adapt to darkness, they reinvent what bodies can be. The first that emerges from the surrounding dark is the barrel-eye fish. At a distance, it seems like an ordinary silhouette drifting calmly through the water. But as we move closer, the shape changes. The top of its head is not solid, it is clear. A transparent dome made of delicate tissue rises above its face like a smooth glass bubble. Inside this dome, two large cylindrical eyes point straight upward, glowing faintly with green reflections. The barrel eye's eyes sit deep within its head, protected by the transparent shield that allows light to pass through untouched. These tubular eyes can move independently, rotating upward to watch for faint glimmers of prey above or turning forward when needed. The fish stays perfectly still, conserving energy, letting the dim shine of drifting bioluminescence filter through its dome. Its vision is shaped entirely by the world around it, a quiet mastery of seeing in a place where light is rare and precious. Not far from the barrel eye, another creature rises from the seafloor. At first, it looks like a thin stick standing upright in the mud. Then it moves with a slow, trembling sway. This is the tripod fish, a being whose body seems to mimic small branches carried by the current. It stands on three long, spindly fins that stretch downward like delicate legs. These fins are so elongated that the fish can perch on them without sinking into the soft sediment. The tripod fish does not rely on sight. Instead, it holds its long pectoral fins outward, letting them act like sensitive feelers. These fins wave gently with any shift in the surrounding water. When a small creature passes nearby, even the tiniest disturbance reveals its position. With a quick but still gentle motion, the tripod fish opens its small mouth and captures the drifting prey. It spends most of its time standing in place, letting the deep currents bring food to it, a patient sentinel on the ocean floor. Farther along our path, we encounter a shape that seems almost dreamlike. It moves with loose, sweeping curves, its body extending into a long ribbon that coils and bends with every slight motion. This is the gulper eel, a creature whose most striking feature is its enormous mouth. The mouth expands into a great balloon-like shape, far wider than the eel's thin body. When closed, it gives the eel a gentle, rounded face. When open, it forms a vast pouch that can hold large prey and great gulps of water. The gulper eel's jaws are supported by delicate bones and soft tissues that allow the mouth to stretch into remarkable shapes. Its small, beady eyes sit near the front of its head, but vision is not its main tool. The glowing tip at the end of its long tail serves as a lure, shifting in the dark like a small drifting creature. When something grows curious and approaches, the eel opens its enormous mouth and captures the animal with a slow, sweeping intake. Its body, flexible and fluid, folds around the shape of its meal as it drifts away once more into the deep. But the gulper eel is not the only strange shape that lives in this silent world. From the dark distance, a long, pale form begins to appear, so faint it seems more like a shimmering thread than a living creature. As we approach, we realize it is only one part of something far larger. This is a siphonophore, a colonial organism made of many specialized individuals that function together as if they were a single being. Some siphonophores can reach lengths longer than the tallest trees on land. Others may stretch farther than a blue whale, and a few, according to recent discoveries, may be the longest animals on the entire planet. The siphonophore drifts in soft spirals, its body composed of repeating segments, each one glowing faintly with bioluminescent light. Some segments capture food, others help the creature move, others reproduce. all work together in a gentle harmony. Its body floats like a ribbon in slow motion, shimmering with delicate patterns of light that pulse with the rhythm of the deep. Seeing it drift through the dark feels like watching a galaxy unravel into a glowing thread. Here, in these quiet depths, life has shaped itself into forms beyond imagination: transparent heads, living legs, balloon mouths, and bodies that stretch into ghostly spirals. Each creature carries the story of millions of years spent in darkness, shaped by pressure, scarcity, and silence into something entirely unique. The deep sea shows us that there is no single way to be alive. There is only the slow and patient creativity of nature, unfolding in shapes as strange as they are extraordinary. As we continue drifting through the deep, the water around us grows still again, and the last faint spirals of the siphonophore fade into the dark. We enter a quiet realm where survival depends not only on strength or speed, but on illusion. In this part of the ocean, predators have learned to hunt with tricks so strange and subtle that they seem almost like acts of magic. In the soft darkness, where light is rare and shadows melt into one another, deception becomes one of the most powerful tools life can wield. The first hint of this appears as a tiny glow, floating gently in the water. It flickers, dims, then brightens again. It looks like a drifting worm or a piece of glowing plankton. But as we move closer, a shape begins to reveal itself behind the light, not large, but purposeful. This small glow is not a creature at all. It is a lure. Many predators in the deep carry lures that mimic tiny animals, drawing curious prey close enough for a silent strike. Some lures resemble small shrimp swaying gently like they are feeding. Others look like the thin glimmer of a worm twisting in the water. A few even imitate the soft, pulsing lights produced by plankton during their nightly ascent. To the eyes of nearby creatures, these lures appear familiar and harmless, but they are part of something far more dangerous. The anglerfish is perhaps the most well-known, though countless species use similar tactics. From its forehead extends a long, thin filament, and at its tip rests a glowing orb. This orb does not simply shine, it performs. It flickers, bends, and sways with the movement of the water. It creates the illusion of a small meal. When a passing fish or drifting shrimp moves close to examine this innocent sparkle, the anglerfish opens its mouth with slow precision. The lure was only the invitation. The trap is the creature behind it. But not all lures look like food. Some mimic the light of entirely different animals. A few deep-sea predators produce flashes that resemble the bioluminescent distress signals used by certain prey species. When small creatures release a burst of light to confuse predators, they are broadcasting a silent alarm. Some hunters have learned to mimic these signals, drawing in creatures who think a member of their own species is crying out nearby. They arrive expecting safety, only to find a predator waiting in the shadows. Beyond mimicry, some predators rely on near invisibility. In the surface world, invisibility sounds impossible. Yet in the deep ocean, where light barely exists and where bodies can be shaped by pressure and darkness, disappearing becomes achievable. Some fish have skin so reflective that it mirrors the faint light above them, making them vanish from the perspective of creatures below. Their scales act like tiny mirrors, bending the dim glow in just the right directions. Other predators blend into the black water not with reflection but with absence. Their bodies become matte, absorbing the little light that reaches them. They fade into the dark, like silhouettes swallowed by shadow. To nearby animals, these predators are nothing more than another patch of water until they move. A single twitch of a fin reveals their presence only in the moment of attack. A few creatures take invisibility even further. Certain transparent predators carry bodies so clear that even their internal organs are difficult to see. Only their eyes and faint digestive tracts betray their existence. In this realm, where most creatures rely on subtle cues rather than broad shapes, a transparent body is the closest thing to disappearing entirely. Yet, among the most remarkable tricks in the deep is the ability to mimic light, not just with shape, but with pattern. Some predators flash bioluminescent signals that imitate the rhythms used by other species during courtship or communication. A small drifting creature, sensing a familiar pattern, approaches with trust. It recognizes the light as belonging to its own kind, but what it thinks is another of its species is actually a patient hunter. These false signals can be incredibly complex. Some predators have rows of tiny light organs that they flash in perfect mimicry of the pulses used by prey species. This deception creates illusions that operate not on sight alone, but on communication. The predator does not simply hide, it speaks in the language of light, sending messages that are not what they appear to be. In these waters, hunting is not a chase, it is a performance. The deep encourages patience, subtlety, and creativity. Predators do not rush, they wait. They blend into the quiet folds of the dark. They craft illusions from bioluminescence, turning the scarcity of light into a tool. Every flicker, every movement, every gentle pulse of blue or green light becomes a possibility. What looks like a drifting worm may be part of a hidden mouth. What seems like a harmless sparkle may be a lure. What appears to be the message of a companion may instead be the voice of a hunter borrowing someone else's language. In this realm shaped by darkness, the boundaries between truth and illusion become soft, and the creatures that thrive here are the ones who have learned to weave the dark into their own quiet magic. As we drift deeper along the path shaped by darkness and weight, the ocean reveals another side of survival. We have seen how predators weave illusions, how lures glow with false promise, and how bodies shift into shapes that seem almost impossible. But in these shadowed waters, the hunted have evolved wonders of their own, defenses so unusual and so quietly astonishing that they feel like small miracles of adaptation. Here, where sunlight has never touched a single stone or creature, defense becomes an art shaped by scarcity and silence. And in this art, light itself becomes a tool. The first sign of this appears as a shimmer, a faint glow that seems to adjust itself with the water around it. In the deep sea, some creatures create a cloak of light that wraps around their bodies in a soft, even glow. This is light-based cloaking, a strategy that allows an animal to blend into the faint hints of illumination that still drift downward from the distant surface. Although the light is sown nearly gone by this depth, it is not entirely absent. A thin wash of blue still filters through the water, barely noticeable but enough to cast a weak glow from above. Certain fish position rows of light organs along their bellies, matching the brightness of the water above. To eyes looking upward, they vanish. Their silhouette dissolves into the dimness, leaving nothing but a seamless patch of water. This cloak is not bright, it does not shine outward. Instead, it balances the tiny remaining light so precisely that it erases the creature's shadow. The skill is delicate, too much glow, and the animal becomes a beacon. Too little, and the shadow returns. But these creatures have mastered the balance. Their bodies shift the light with a careful, subtle rhythm, adjusting with the changing depth or angle of a passing predator. To hide in these depths, they paint themselves in light, but not all defenses are slow or gentle. Some bursts of survival appear as sudden, startling displays that crack open the darkness in an instant. In the deep, where light is precious and rare, such a display carries a power that cannot exist anywhere near the surface. A small squid, drifting with soft pulses, senses a predator moving behind it. Rather than flee with speed it does not have, the squid releases a sudden flash of bright blue light. Its whole body becomes a kind of living flare. The light is so intense that it cuts through the shadows like a star briefly igniting. The predator, confused by the burst, hesitates. In that brief moment, the squid twists away and disappears into the dark. Once the flare fades, the water returns to silence as if nothing happened. Some creatures produce flashes not from their bodies, but from luminous chemicals they release into the water. A startled shrimp may spit a glowing cloud that drifts like a small nebula. The cloud expands, pulsing softly as it spreads. The predator, unsure where the shrimp has gone, stares into the glowing veil. Meanwhile, the shrimp has already slipped far into the shadows. The drifting cloud slowly dims, its last spark fading into the surrounding black. These shock displays are not aggressive. They are simple acts of survival in a world where speed, strength, and thick armor rarely exist. The deep rewards subtlety, but it also rewards boldness in precise moments, and these creatures have found ways to spark the darkness when escape demands it. Yet perhaps the most surprising defense in this world without color is the sudden flare of hues that appear from animals who have evolved patterns we cannot see under normal conditions. Down here, there is no red or orange in the traditional sense. The wavelengths that carry those colors disappear long before reaching these depths, but creatures still carry pigments and reflective surfaces that scatter whatever light touches them. Some fish, when threatened, shift their bodies in ways that send shimmering waves across their scales. These waves do not look like the colors we know. They appear more like shifting brightness, a ripple of intensity that travels across the body. Even though color, as we understand it, does not exist here, these flashes can still confuse or startle a predator. The effect is like a sudden glow of unfamiliar patterns, a brief disruption in the steady calm of the deep. Other creatures use thin, iridescent membranes hidden beneath folds of skin. When startled, they flare these membranes wide, creating broad, reflective surfaces. These surfaces catch and scatter the faintest glimmers of bioluminescence in the surrounding water. The result is a kind of shimmering shield that appears for an instant before folding back into the body. Even though the membrane may be nearly invisible at rest, when exposed it becomes a bright fan of reflected light. Still, others rely on patterns that only reveal themselves during movement. A soft-bodied creature might fold its limbs in ways that hide reflective patches. When it suddenly extends them, the patches catch stray light, creating a brief flash that breaks the predator's focus. The creature folds its limbs again and drifts away with slow, steady motions, returning to invisibility. In the deep, defense is not about aggression. It is about patience, precision, and understanding the darkness. These animals have transformed light into something flexible, something that bends to their needs. They hide in it, shape it, flare it, and reflect it. They use it in ways so subtle and complex that they seem to rewrite the rules of visibility. Here, in the ancient stillness of the deep ocean, even survival becomes a form of artistry. As we continue drifting deeper through the dark water, the ocean's quiet weight becomes ever more present. It presses gently against us from all sides, steady and constant, growing heavier with every meter of descent. At the surface, pressure feels like nothing at all. Down here, it becomes one of the most powerful forces shaping life itself. Yet the creatures of the deep move through this weight as calmly as birds gliding through air. Their bodies remain whole, their cells remain stable. Their world, though shaped by crushing force, feels peaceful rather than dangerous. To understand how they survive, we must look at the physics that surrounds them, the quiet structure of water, and the remarkable adaptations life has learned over millions of years. One of the most important truths of the deep is that water cannot be easily compressed. When we picture pressure, we often imagine objects being squeezed, flattened, or crushed. But water behaves differently. It resists compression with incredible strength. This single property becomes the foundation of survival for many deep sea animals. Most of the creatures here are filled almost entirely with water. Their tissues, organs, and cells are saturated with it. They hold little air, if any at all. Air can be compressed, but water cannot. By filling their bodies with water, these animals become resistant to collapse. The surrounding pressure does not crush them because their internal pressure matches the external one. They are not pushing against the ocean's weight. They are part of it. Imagine a glass sphere filled with water and lowered into the depths. Even though the pressure may grow to hundreds of times what we feel on land, the water inside the sphere supports the shape from within. The same principle shapes deep sea bodies. Soft tissues bend and shift, but they do not collapse. Muscles become flexible, bones become lighter or disappear entirely. Every part of the creature becomes a quiet participant in the present, surrounding pressure, rather than a structure standing rigid against it. Yet water alone cannot explain their survival. Pressure acts not only on large structures, but also on the microscopic foundations of life. Proteins, the tiny machines inside cells, must fold in specific shapes to do their work. Under extreme pressure, these shapes can warp, destabilize, or unfold entirely. If that happens, life stops functioning. Deep sea creatures have evolved proteins adapted to withstand these extraordinary forces. These proteins fold more tightly, with stronger internal bonds that resist the pressure's attempt to unravel them. Their surfaces carry patterns of charges that hold them steady, almost like small anchors woven into the protein's shape. Even in the deepest trenches, where pressure grows to more than 1,000 times that at the surface, these proteins continue to perform their tasks quietly. But even strong proteins need help. Pressure affects the water inside cells as well, altering the delicate balance that keeps life flowing. To protect themselves, deep-sea organisms rely on small molecules that stabilize their cells. One of the most important of these molecules is trimethylamine oxide, often shortened to TMAO. TMAO acts like a guardian inside the cell. It prevents water molecules from crowding too tightly around proteins, keeping them from being forced into the wrong shapes. It lifts and supports the proteins just enough so they can function under immense pressure. The deeper the creature lives, the more TMAO it carries. In shallow animals, the molecule exists only in small amounts. In creatures living several thousand meters down, the concentration increases steadily. In those living near the deepest trenches, TMAO fills their cells in high levels, a silent shield against the weight of the entire ocean. This effort is delicate. Too little TMAO, and the proteins collapse. Too much, and the cell becomes unbalanced. Deep sea creatures have mastered this chemistry over countless generations, finding just the right amount to keep their inner world steady. We often imagine deep sea life as fragile, but in truth, they are masters of physics. Their bodies bend with pressure rather than resist it. Their proteins hold their shape under conditions that would destroy surface life. Their cells carry molecules crafted by evolution to keep everything stable in an environment where even a small imbalance could be fatal. Some creatures use additional strategies. Their membranes, the thin boundaries surrounding every cell, contain special fats that remain flexible in cold, high-pressure conditions. If these membranes were rigid, the cell would crack. Instead, they ripple softly, responding to pressure like gentle fabric. Others reduce internal structures entirely. They have no swim bladders because air pockets would compress and collapse. They avoid heavy skeletons because dense bone cannot adjust to the deep's shifting force. The deep sea teaches its creatures to become fluid, to move with the water, to be part of the immense weight rather than stand against it. As we drift through this realm shaped by pressure, we begin to sense the quiet elegance of these adaptations. The deep does not crush life here, it molds it. It guides bodies into new forms, reshapes chemistry, and teaches cells to endure weight that seems unimaginable from the surface. Life has not learned to fight the pressure, it has learned to belong to it. As we drift onward through the deep, the darkness remains absolute, soft, and unbroken. Vision grows less useful with every slow meter we descend. Light disappears, color disappears. Even the faintest glimmer becomes rare enough to feel almost precious. Yet the ocean is not silent. It carries a different kind of language, one that does not rely on brightness or shape. Down here, sound becomes more than something heard. It becomes a sense, a way of seeing through the dark, a means of understanding the world when eyes can no longer guide the way. Water holds sound differently than air. In our everyday world, sound spreads slowly, weakened by the space between molecules. Air is thin and light, and sound moves through it with soft edges. But water is dense. Its molecules sit close together, touching and pressing against each other. When a vibration enters water, it passes quickly from one molecule to the next. There is little space for it to fade. Because of this, sound travels far faster underwater than it does in the air above. It travels farther as well, carrying information across enormous distances. A gentle pulse created near the surface can move downward through layers of water like a quiet ripple. A low, rumbling call made by a creature hidden in the deep can spread across kilometers. In the darkness where eyes lose their power, sound becomes the clearest way to sense what lies beyond reach. Many deep-sea animals rely on this truth. They do not wait for shapes to appear or glimmers to reveal direction. Instead, they send out low-frequency pulses that travel like soft waves through the water around them. These pulses bounce against objects, creatures, and even geological formations before returning. By feeling the returning vibrations, the animal gains a picture of the world, not through sight, but through pressure and echo. Some species of fish create gentle thumps with specialized muscles along their swim bladders. These vibrations travel outward and return, with hints of the surrounding terrain. The fish do not hear these signals in the way humans hear sound. Instead, they feel them through sensitive organs that line their skin or inner structures. Every pulse becomes a question, and every returning echo becomes an answer. Certain deep-sea crustaceans use sound in quieter ways. They sense the vibrations carried through the sediment itself. The ground becomes a network of signals, a thin layer of information that reveals footsteps, shifting currents, or the movements of predators. Even slight changes in the mud can guide these creatures, helping them avoid danger or move toward food. In the deepest stretches, where pressure is immense and light is forever absent, a few animals produce extremely low-frequency sounds, ones that humans would not be able to hear without special instruments. These vibrations can carry astonishing distances. Some whales create calls that travel from one end of an ocean basin to another. Though whales do not live in the abyss, their deep voices pass through it, shaping the soundscape of these waters. The ocean, as silent as it seems to our eyes, holds a constant background of faint tremors, clicks, rumbles, and distant pulses. Some of these are created by creatures, others come from shifting currents, underwater landslides, and volcanic activity. A few, however, remain mysterious. Over the years, NOAA, the American agency that studies oceans and the atmosphere, has recorded unusual underwater sounds. These signals are real. They echo through the deep with patterns that do not easily match known sources. Because sound travels so far underwater, the origin of these signals can be difficult to pinpoint. Scientists give them gentle nicknames based on what they resemble when heard through speakers. One such sound was recorded in the late 1990s. It rose upward in frequency, a long, rising moan captured across thousands of kilometers. The sound was so powerful that multiple sensors detected it across an enormous stretch of ocean. Its origin has been debated. Some believed it came from icebergs scraping against the seafloor. Others thought it might be volcanic activity deep within the earth. The true source has not been fully confirmed. Another strange sound carried a rhythmic, pulsing tone, like a distant heartbeat echoing through the water. Yet no matching geological or biological source was ever found. Many unexplained sounds have eventually been linked to natural forces, such as cracking ice or underwater earthquakes, but a few remain open questions, gentle reminders that the deep still holds mysteries far beyond what we have learned. These mysteries carry no fear in the world of the deep. They are simply part of the ocean's own quiet language. Each unknown signal becomes another thread in the tapestry of vibrations that weave through the water. The creatures who live here do not know these sounds as puzzles. They know them as parts of their environment, rhythm woven into the stillness. Sound, in the deep, becomes a way of sensing distance, direction, motion, and presence. It becomes a way of connecting to a world without light, a method of painting the surroundings through vibration. Life moves gently in response, guided by the soft echoes that drift through the water. Down here, where sight fades to nothing, sound becomes its own form of vision. As we continue to drift through the deep, the darkness around us grows quieter. The animals that filled earlier layers of the ocean become fewer here. Their lights are rarer, their movements softer. The water feels heavier, stiller, as if we are passing into a slower rhythm of life. Yet this quiet does not mean emptiness. Far below the realms shaped by light and drifting snow, another kind of world begins to appear, one that does not depend on sunlight at all. Here, life is built from chemicals instead of light. It forms its own ecosystems in places where plants cannot grow and where no beam from the surface has ever reached. These microbial worlds glow not with visible light, but with the energy hidden within molecules of methane, sulfur, or hydrogen rising from the seafloor. Chemosynthesis replaces photosynthesis in these deep places. On the surface, nearly all life depends on sunlight. Plants and algae collect light and turn it into energy. Animals feed on them and on each other, creating long chains of life that eventually lead back to the sun. But in the deep, that connection breaks. Sunlight stops long before it reaches these worlds. Instead, microbes use chemical energy, turning it into food the way surface organisms use sunlight. We drift toward a patch of seafloor where this quiet alchemy begins. The mud seems unremarkable at first. It lies in soft ripples shaped by slow currents, but beneath it, gases seep from the crust. Methane rises in thin streams. Hydrogen seeps up in small, invisible plumes. Sulfur compounds drift through cracks in the rock. These molecules carry stored energy, formed by the slow interactions between minerals and seawater deep in the earth. Microbes gather around these sources, feeding on chemical reactions instead of light. Some of these microbes live in thin layers on rocks or sediment. They form delicate films, so faint they can be missed with an untrained eye, but their presence shapes entire ecosystems. They take methane and break it apart, using part of it for energy while turning the rest into new substances that other microbes can use. Their bodies become tiny factories where chemistry and life blend into one process. Closer to places where sulfur rises from vents in the ground, sulfur oxidizing bacteria coat rocks with soft, white layers. These microbes turn sulfur into new compounds while collecting the energy that sulfur releases during the transformation. Their growth supports communities of animals that graze upon them or host them inside their bodies. A few meters away, another set of microbes feeds on hydrogen. Hydrogen is a simple molecule, yet the energy it carries is enough to support entire colonies. These colonies create small lumps or mats in the sediment, often appearing as faint discolorations that hint at the life hidden within. Moving deeper into this realm, we find places where methane bubbles rise from the ground like quiet springs. Around these seeps, tiny bacterial colonies form, thick mats that appear pale and ghostly under the dim light of our instruments. These mats provide food for worms, small clams, and other animals that cluster around the seeps. Some of these animals carry their own internal microbial partners. The microbes live inside them, providing energy in exchange for safe shelter. The animals, in turn, no longer need to feed in the traditional sense. They become hosts to entire living chemical systems. These microbial worlds feel ancient. They resemble the conditions scientists believe once existed on early Earth, long before plants covered continents and long before the first animals swam in shallow seas. Billions of years ago, our planet was shaped by volcanic gases, mineral-rich water, and a sun that had not yet reached its full strength. Life began in environments much like these, environments where chemistry and heat formed the first spark of existence. The deep sea preserves pieces of that distant past. Microbes living on methane and sulfur mirror the metabolism of ancient organisms that once thrived near volcanic pools or inside early oceans. Their structures are simple, their needs quiet. They do not reach for sunlight or chase drifting prey. They live in stillness, supported by the energy trapped within the earth itself. As we glide above these chemical communities, the seafloor appears calm. But beneath the surface lies a constant hum of transformation. Molecules are taken apart and rebuilt. Energy moves through invisible pathways. Microbes divide slowly, shaping the sediment in ways that ripple outward through the entire ecosystem. The animals here, though small and often unseen, depend on these microscopic workers. Tube worms, clams, and certain species of shrimp live symbiotically with their microbes. The microbes turn chemicals into nourishment. The hosts provide a home. Together, they create life in a place where traditional food chains would collapse. The further we explore, the more we see how these microbial landscapes thrive in silence. These are worlds where time moves gently, where life uncurls in slow breaths. The energy that supports them does not arrive in waves of sunlight. It rises from the earth itself, steady and patient. In the deep ocean, microbes have turned chemistry into survival, shaping ecosystems that continue quietly in the dark. As we drift onward through the deep, the water grows colder and heavier once again. The soft landscapes of microbial mats fade behind us, and the sediment beneath becomes darker, finer, and more uniform. For a moment, the seafloor feels almost still. Then, from the distance, a faint shimmer appears. It is not light in the way we know it. It is a wavering distortion, like heat rising from a desert road. As we move closer, the shimmer thickens until the water around it begins to ripple with strange motion. We have reached one of the most unusual places on Earth, a hydrothermal vent field. Here, beneath thousands of meters of pressure, the Earth breathes through cracks in its crust. Hot water, pushed upward by the molten rock below, erupts into the ocean with tremendous force. This water is no ordinary seawater. It has traveled deep into the crust, gathering minerals as it heated and circulating through volcanic rocks before returning to the seafloor. When it escapes, it carries chemicals that shape entire ecosystems. Some vents erupt in dark clouds so thick they resemble underwater smoke. These are called black smokers. The superheated water bursts from tall chimneys, rising like columns built from minerals that harden the moment they touch the cold ocean. The water flowing from them can reach temperatures near 400 degrees Celsius. Yet, astonishingly, it does not boil. The immense pressure of the deep keeps it liquid, trapping heat within each plume. Around black smokers, the water trembles with patterns of shimmering distortion. Minerals swirl in dark clouds, turning the vent's flow into a steady fountain of blackness. This darkness contains iron, sulfides, and other metals that form the building blocks of unusual ecosystems. White smokers are gentler by comparison. Their plumes rise in pale shapes, created by minerals like barium and calcium that color the water with milky softness. These vents are cooler than black smokers, though still far hotter than the surrounding sea. Together, black and white smokers create a landscape that looks almost dreamlike, with towers, chimneys, and drifting plumes rising from the Earth's crust. At first glance, this harsh environment seems unsuitable for life. The water is scalding near the vents and freezing only a few meters away. Toxic chemicals fill the plumes. There is no sunlight, yet this is where some of Earth's most extraordinary creatures thrive. As we move closer, we find them. Standing in clusters around the vents are giant tube worms, their white bodies rising like tall, delicate chimneys of their own. At their tips, bright red plumes unfold like soft, feathery crowns. These plumes are rich with hemoglobin, the same molecule that carries oxygen in human blood. Though here, it has adapted to bind both oxygen and hydrogen sulfide, a toxic chemical that the worms must absorb to feed their microbial partners. These tube worms have no mouths. They have no digestive systems. Inside their bodies, specialized microbes live in vast numbers. The worms gather chemicals from the vent water and deliver them to these microbes. The microbes, in turn, use chemosynthesis to turn the chemicals into nourishment. In a sense, the worms are caretakers, living vessels for the microbes that feed them. The relationship is so complete that neither could exist without the other. In this deep world of toxic heat and mineral-rich water, they have built an entire life together. Around the tube worms, other animals gather. White crabs scuttle across the vent surfaces, feeding on microbial mats that coat the rocks. Their claws and shells are thick and pale. They seem almost carved from the minerals that surround them. Nearby, small shrimp glow faintly under the dim lights of our instruments. Their eyes, adapted to detect flickering vent light, guide them toward microbial patches. Some species graze on the bacteria directly, others rely on internal microbes, just as the tube worms do. A few meters away, mussels cluster in broad patches, forming living reefs on the seafloor. They open and close slowly, filtering water rich with chemicals. Like the worms and shrimp, many of them host microbes inside their bodies, feeding from chemical energy instead of plankton or algae. In the hottest zones, closer to the vents' openings, extremophiles flourish. These microorganisms thrive at temperatures that would destroy most surface life. Some prefer heat above 80 degrees Celsius. A few tolerate temperatures above 100 degrees while remaining stable under immense pressure. Their proteins fold differently. Their membranes behave in ways that seem almost otherworldly. They survive not despite the heat, but because of it. These extremophiles hold subtle clues about what early life on Earth might have looked like. Long before sunlight supported vast oceans of algae and plants, early organisms may have relied on chemical energy rising from vents much like these. The conditions here resemble an ancient world where heat, minerals, and water first combined to form the earliest living systems. Some scientists believe that life may have begun in environments just like this, where minerals acted as catalysts and chemical gradients provided energy long before photosynthesis existed. As we watch the vents continue their steady release of heat and minerals, the seafloor seems alive with quiet motion. Plumes rise, microbial films shimmer, tube worms sway in the gentle currents. Every organism here thrives in a world built not from sunlight, but from the Earth's inner fire. These hydrothermal forests feel both alien and deeply connected to the planet's oldest traditions, places where chemistry, heat, and pressure meet to create life in its own unique form. The seafloor shifts again as we move away from the shimmering towers of the hydrothermal vents. The sharp heat softens, replaced by a cooler calm that settles over the landscape like a long, steady breath. The ground becomes smoother, covered in fine sediment that stretches outward in quiet plains. Nothing seems unusual at first glance. The water is cold, the light is gone, and the sediment appears motionless. Then a pale patch appears ahead, a faint glow of color against the darker mud. Another patch follows, then another. These places are easy to miss, yet they mark the entrance to a different kind of deep-sea ecosystem, one that draws its energy from chemical sources rising slowly from the Earth's crust. These are cold seeps, places where methane, hydrogen sulfide, and other chemicals seep from the seafloor in steady, gentle flows. Unlike the dramatic heat of hydrothermal vents, cold seeps earn their name from the temperature of the water that escapes. It is as cold as the surrounding sea, yet rich with chemical energy. Life gathers here in soft clusters, shaped by methane the way surface ecosystems are shaped by sunlight. In some parts of the seep, methane hydrates lie beneath the sediment like frozen glass. These hydrates form when methane mixes with water under immense pressure and low temperatures, creating crystalline structures that resemble ice but behave more like solidified gas. They sit beneath the mud in layered sheets or rounded lumps. Occasionally, fragments break free and glimmer faintly as the currents brush over them. These frozen pockets hold more methane than the water above them could ever contain on its own. The hydrates store it until small changes in temperature or pressure allow the gas to escape. Above these frozen forms, the seafloor begins to change. Thin mats of microbes grow in sweeping patches, feeding on methane as their source of energy. These microbial blankets look almost like spilled milk or pale paint washed over the frost. Mud. The bacteria inside them break down methane molecules and release energy. In turn, they create nutrients that support a community of animals living around the seep. Slow-growing clams anchor themselves into the soft sediment. Their shells are often thick and rounded, built to withstand the long years required for growth in a place where resources arrive gently and gradually. Many of these clams host their own internal microbes, tucked inside specialized tissues. The microbes convert methane or sulfur into nutrients. The clams provide shelter and stability. Together they form a quiet partnership that allows life to rise from cold chemical flows. Crabs wander through this landscape with a measured, deliberate rhythm. Their movements stir thin clouds of sediment that settle again within moments. The crabs feed on the microbial mats or on small fragments of organic material drifting across the seep. Their bodies grow slowly, shaped by an environment where energy flows in steady but limited supply. Some crabs gather in groups around richer patches of microbial growth, their legs tapping lightly against the ground. Worms rise from the sediment in tall clusters, their bodies slender and pale. Some species host microbes within their tissues, just as the clams do. Others feed directly on the microbial mats that cover the seep. Their slow swaying gives the impression of underwater grasses moved by a faint breeze. Every movement is unhurried. The deep encourages patience, and these creatures have learned to follow its rhythm. This entire ecosystem exists without sunlight. No plant life grows here. No algae drift overhead. Instead, all energy begins with simple molecules rising from beneath the seafloor. The microbes convert methane or sulfur into usable forms, becoming the foundation of a food web built entirely from chemical reactions. From these tiny organisms come clams, worms, crabs, and eventually the larger animals that feed on them. Even fish sometimes gather at the edges of cold seeps, drifting slowly through the faintly shimmering patches of life. The seeps themselves can last for decades or centuries. Some remain active for thousands of years, allowing the communities that depend on them to grow in slow, steady cycles. Others fade when the underground flow shifts, leaving behind pale shells, thin microbial traces, and the lingering impression of a small world shaped by chemistry alone. Further along the seep, tall carbonate formations rise from the sediment. These structures form as microbes convert methane into compounds that combine with minerals in the water, gradually building rocky shapes that resemble coral or stone towers. They are reminders that even in the deep, where life moves gently, tiny organisms can reshape the landscape over time. The atmosphere of a cold seep feels quiet, almost suspended. The animals barely move. The microbial mats shimmer with soft colors under the faint illumination of instruments. The methane hydrates lie beneath the seafloor, like hidden reservoirs of energy. The entire world here is built on slow transformations, chemical breaths released from the earth into a sea that waits patiently for the smallest spark of life. Cold seeps reveal that the deep does not depend on sunlight to stay alive. It builds its own worlds, even in the coldest, darkest corners of the ocean. Far beneath the surface, in a world shaped by darkness and pressure, the rhythm of life slows into something patient and deliberate. Energy is scarce, predators are silent, and food arrives in gentle fragments. In such a place, survival depends not only on how creatures feed or move, but on how they continue their species. Reproduction in the deep unfolds with a quiet strangeness, shaped by isolation and the endless night. It is a world where mates find each other without sight, where bodies merge into shared lives, and where new generations grow slowly in the calm shadow of the sea. In the deep ocean, finding a mate is one of the greatest challenges. The water stretches outward in all directions, filled with vast distances and few signals. Animals drift far apart, often moving independently for long periods of time. Sight is rarely useful. Sound travels, but many species do not produce calls. Instead, life turns to chemistry. Chemical signals become the language of attraction. Many deep-sea creatures release faint trails of scent, so subtle that they blend seamlessly into the water around them. These scents drift through the dark like invisible threads. A potential mate, moving alone across the depths, can sense these traces with delicate organs built to detect the finest chemical changes. The signals may guide them over long distances, carrying the presence of another creature through currents that sweep slowly across the deep. Some animals release these signals only during short windows, saving precious energy. Others, especially those that rarely encounter members of their own species, release them more constantly, creating a silent beacon that drifts through the water until it reaches the right recipient. In this way, chemistry becomes a map, a quiet guide through the dark. Among the many unusual strategies found in the deep, none is more extraordinary than the life of the anglerfish. Their world is so dark and so expansive that males and females rarely meet. To solve this, evolution has shaped a partnership as unusual as it is efficient. The female anglerfish carries a glowing lure that helps her feed in the darkness. She can grow large, sometimes the size of a small basketball. The male, by contrast, is tiny. He spends his early life drifting through the water, guided by a sense of smell far more sensitive than his other senses. His entire purpose is to find a female. Once he does, he bites her skin, and a remarkable transformation begins. His tissues fuse with hers, his blood vessels merge into her bloodstream. Over time, his organs shrink. He loses his independence, becoming part of her body. What remains of him is mostly his reproductive organs, which she can draw on whenever needed. The female carries several males this way, each one living as a permanent partner. It may seem strange, but in a world where partners may never meet again, this merging becomes a solution shaped by necessity. The deep offers few opportunities. It rewards complete certainty. Not all species take such extreme paths. Many deep-sea fish release clouds of eggs and sperm into the water, allowing them to drift until they meet. The currents carry the fertilized eggs far from the parents, sometimes bringing them closer to shallower layers where food is more abundant for young larvae. Once the young grow strong enough to survive the deep, they return slowly downward, sinking into the cooler, darker waters where their adult lives will unfold. Some creatures brood their young with great care. Certain shrimp and crabs carry their eggs tucked beneath their bodies, moving slowly so the fragile clusters remain unharmed. A few species of deep-sea octopus guard their eggs for incredible lengths of time, curling around them for months or even years. The cold water slows development, so the mother waits patiently, feeding little and moving only when necessary. When the young finally emerge, they arrive in a world that has been protected by her. Stillness. Slow growth shapes many deep-sea species. Food is scarce, temperatures are cold, and energy must be conserved. Because of this, individuals grow at a pace that feels almost frozen compared to surface life. Some fish take years to reach maturity. Some crustaceans grow through countless small molts over long stretches of time. Even once they reach adulthood, they may reproduce only occasionally. Long lives often pair with this slow growth. Certain deep-sea sharks can live for centuries. Some bivalves grow layer by layer over lifetimes that exceed many human civilizations. Their bodies record the passing of time in thin lines and shell rings, quiet reminders of years lived without haste. In the dark, still waters, reproduction becomes an act of patience. It is shaped by chemistry instead of sight, by merging instead of courtship, by slow development instead of quick cycles. Every strategy reflects the deep's quiet logic. Life takes its time. It invests carefully. It adapts to distance, silence, and scarcity. Here, in this calm and ancient world, continuation of life depends not on speed or abundance, but on subtle signals, long waits, and remarkable forms of partnership that unfold in the quiet dark. The deeper we travel, the more the ocean feels like a world composed of small, hidden enclaves. Each region holds its own quiet stories, shaped by currents, pressure, and time. In these still places, life follows paths that never touch the surface. Species drift apart from their ancestors, guided by isolation and patience, until they become creatures that have no close relatives anywhere else on Earth. The deep sea is often described as a single vast realm, but in many ways it behaves like a collection of islands. The trenches, ridges, and basins are separated by great distances. They are divided by pressure zones, temperature boundaries, and underwater geography that creates natural partitions. A population that drifts into one of these isolated pockets may remain there for millions of years without ever reconnecting with its original home. Over time, the forces of evolution shape it into something entirely new. This process unfolds quietly. There are no storms or waves to mark its beginning, no sudden changes to announce it. Instead, isolation starts with a small group of individuals whose paths lead them into a region cut off from the rest of the sea. Once there, they adapt to the conditions of their new environment. Pressure, temperature, and the availability of food slowly guide the changes in their bodies. Their DNA begins to shift in small steps, one generation after another. This slow accumulation of change is known as genetic drift. And in the deep, where populations are small and separated, it plays an especially powerful role. Imagine a group of fish that settles in a narrow trench. The trench may be thousands of meters deep, with steep walls that are difficult for most animals to cross. Above them lies a water column filled with pressures they cannot tolerate. Around them is darkness so complete that sight becomes almost unnecessary. Over thousands of years, the fish adapt to these surroundings. Their eyes change shape or shrink. Their bones lighten. Their skin loses pigment. Each generation inherits subtle differences, and eventually the fish becomes something distinct, something that no longer resembles the surface ancestors from which they descended. The deep-sea snailfish found in some trenches show this pattern clearly. These fish have evolved unique bodies built specifically for extreme depths. Their bones are soft. Their muscles contain compounds that keep cells stable under immense pressure. Their shapes match the narrow constraints of their home. They share a distant connection with shallower relatives, but millions of years of isolation have turned them into something new. Other creatures follow similar paths. Certain crustaceans found only in particular trenches have shaped their bodies around the narrow range of temperatures and pressures that define their home. Some amphipods grow unusually large, while others shrink into tiny forms. The food they rely on may come from chemical reactions in the sediment or from small amounts of organic matter drifting from above. Over long stretches of time, these creatures diverge from their original species, slowly carving their own evolutionary identities. These isolated populations become biological islands. Unlike islands on land, which rise from the surface in clear boundaries, these islands are invisible, defined not by physical edges, but by the deep ocean's harsh and stable barriers. A trench might remain unchanged for millions of years, providing a consistent environment where slow evolution can unfold. The creatures that live there adapt to the constancy of their surroundings. Their lives follow the pace of the deep, where time stretches outward in long, unbroken lines. Some of these species have no known relatives elsewhere. They are discovered only when a submersible or remotely operated vehicle passes through their isolated world. Scientists may observe a fish, worm, or crustacean that shares little with the animals known from shallower waters. Its body is shaped by a long lineage of adaptation that has unfolded far from the rest of life on Earth. In some cases, entire communities evolve independently. A trench may hold a group of species that interact only with one another. Their relationships build intricate food webs in miniature, connected by chemical energy, drifting particles, or scavenging habits. These communities live at a depth that prevents new species from entering or old species from leaving. The boundaries remain tight, forming ecosystems that evolve like self-contained worlds. The deep sea's stillness supports this independence. Temperature remains nearly constant. Pressure never changes. Light never returns. In such a stable environment, evolution is guided not by sudden disruptions but by the gradual shaping of traits. Species adapt to the narrow demands of their habitat, growing in ways that seem strange to those who live nearer to the sunlit world. Over time, the deep becomes filled with lineages that have drifted far from their starting points. They are reminders that evolution does not require rapid change or dramatic events. It simply needs time, isolation, and the steady guidance of environmental forces. The deep sea offers all of these in abundance. In these quiet, separated places, life moves along pathways that lead into forms and behaviors found nowhere else. Hidden far beneath the waves, these isolated species continue their slow, patient divergence, shaped by nothing more than darkness, pressure, and the passage of countless years. The further we descend into the deep, the more the ocean reveals a quiet truth that shapes every creature living here. The deep does not rush. It does not demand constant change or sudden adaptation. Instead, it guides life with steady patience. Pressure, cold, and darkness become sculptors, slowly carving shapes and behaviors that might seem unusual to us but make perfect sense in this silent world. Many of the deep sea's most unusual traits are not temporary quirks. They persist generation after generation. They sharpen and refine themselves through slow processes that unfold over vast stretches of time. Natural selection works here with a gentler rhythm than on the surface, where seasons shift quickly and environments change often. In the deep, stability becomes the rule. The water remains cold year after year. The pressure stays immense. Sunlight never arrives. Because of this constancy, traits that fit the deep's narrow demands become deeply rooted. Some of these traits appear bizarre when viewed through the lens of surface life. Strange body shapes, unusually large mouths, glowing organs, and delicate bones that would collapse in other environments become reliable tools here. They persist because the deep rewards anything that conserves energy, improves survival even slightly, or adapts to the conditions that never change. Consider the creatures with oversized jaws. On the surface, such proportions might seem excessive or impractical, but in the deep, where prey can be rare and unpredictable, the ability to swallow something larger than oneself becomes valuable. A fish that encounters a meal of unusual size cannot afford to let it pass. Its life may depend on seizing every chance. Over countless generations, the individuals with slightly wider mouths or more flexible jaws survived more often. Those traits, once small advantages, slowly became defining features. Transparency is another trait that thrives here. Clear skin, clear muscles, even clear skulls are forms of camouflage that require little energy to maintain. In a place where light barely exists, transparency helps animals blend into the faint glow and shadows of the water. It avoids detection without requiring pigment or structural complexity. Over time, species that arrived with even the faintest transparency found themselves blending more naturally into the environment. Their descendants inherited and expanded that clarity until transparency became the rule rather than the exception. Soft bodies, too, persist because they serve the deep well. Pressure increases with each passing meter, pressing against every structure. Hard skeletons risk cracking or collapsing under the immense weight of the water. Flexible, water-rich tissues handle the pressure far better. Many deep-sea animals evolved bodies that behave more like soft bags of water than rigid frameworks. These forms may appear fragile, but they are perfectly suited to the forces around them. Generations of quiet. Selection favored individuals that bent instead of broke. Slow growth is another persistent trait shaped by the deep's environment. The cold water slows metabolism. Food arrives gently, rarely in abundance. Animals that conserve energy by growing slowly or delaying reproduction often survive longer. They extend their lifespans, allowing them more opportunities to produce offspring even when reproduction is infrequent. Over time, this patience becomes woven into the biology of the species. Young grow in slow, steady steps. Adults may live for decades or even centuries. Their pace matches the rhythm of their world. Underlying these unusual traits is a simple but powerful force: slow mutation rates. In cold water, chemical reactions inside cells proceed more gradually. DNA replication, repair, and errors happen less frequently. This reduces the number of mutations that arise in each generation. On the surface, where temperatures fluctuate and environments change quickly, mutations occur more often and selection acts more rapidly. In the deep, change is measured in longer cycles. Because mutations arise more slowly, evolution works with what already exists. Traits that fit the environment become deeply entrenched. Traits that do not fit fade away quietly, not through rapid shifts, but through long sequences of gentle corrections. The deep's patience becomes the foundation of its biodiversity. Over millions of years, this combination of steady conditions, slow genetic change, and careful selection creates lineages that appear strange to surface observers. But to the deep, these traits are elegant solutions. They help creatures conserve energy, survive scarcity, and remain stable in a realm defined by silence and stillness. Bioluminescent organs remain because communication through light is efficient and useful in darkness. Oversized eyes persist because even the smallest glimmer of light can reveal food or danger. Complete blindness remains common because sight demands energy, and in much of the deep, there is nothing to see. These traits all grow from the same foundation. The deep rewards what works, and it rewards it for long periods of time. The deep ocean's creatures are not oddities. They are the result of evolutionary patience, shaped by an environment that changes so slowly that every adaptation becomes a quiet masterpiece carved across generations. In this world, strangeness is simply the outcome of life finding its best path through cold, pressure, and darkness that never lifts. Far below the sunlit world, where pressure settles heavily on every surface and the water grows still, the seafloor begins to curve into shapes that feel strangely familiar. Broad depressions, smooth basins, and gentle edges appear in the darkness as if carved by the flow of something heavier than water. At first, the shapes seem like tricks of the light, quiet folds of sediment shaped by slow currents. But as we move closer, a shimmering boundary reveals itself, soft and wavering, like heat above desert sand. This is not an illusion, it is the surface of an underwater lake. The deep sea holds places where salt becomes so concentrated that it sinks and gathers into pools, creating heavy brine far denser than the seawater around it. These brine pools settle into low spots on the ocean floor, forming lakes and rivers that do not mix easily with the water above. Their surfaces ripple quietly under passing currents, mirroring the way wind shapes lakes on land. The edges trace shorelines along the sediment, complete with gentle slopes and small terraces built by chemical reactions and slow deposition. To look at one of these pools is to witness a world inside a world. The boundaries between the two waters are clear enough to outline. A thin line separates normal seawater from the concentrated brine. The upper water floats above the lower, unable to mix because of the difference in density. Even light behaves differently as it passes through the boundary. Shadows bend, colors shift. The place feels calm, almost otherworldly. Around these brine pools, animals gather at the edges, much as creatures on land might linger near a shoreline. Mussels form dense clusters along the boundary, their shells arranged like soft fences tracing the shape of the pool. They thrive because microbes inside their tissues feed on the chemical energy rising from the brine. The mussels anchor themselves with delicate threads, holding on despite the stillness that surrounds them. Small crabs wander along the edges, stepping carefully across the transition. When they dip a claw too far into the brine, they quickly withdraw. The heavy water offers no oxygen and holds chemicals that can overwhelm most forms of life. Yet right at its boundary, life flourishes. The edges become feeding grounds and resting places, shaped by the meeting of two waters that never fully blend. Tube worms sometimes cluster along the slopes near the pools. These worms rely on microbial partners that convert chemicals leaking upward into energy. Their bodies sway gently in the quiet currents, while their plumes extend outward to capture the smallest traces of nourishment. The brine itself is deadly to them, but the chemicals rising from it create the foundation of their world. They live at the very line where danger meets opportunity. Fish hover above the brine, like birds gliding over mirrored ponds. Some seem to investigate the surface, dipping downward before quickly pulling away, their bodies recoiling from the dense layer below. The line between the waters acts almost like a physical barrier. A fish that dives too deeply into the brine risks becoming trapped, its gills unable to function. Many species instinctively keep to the upper water, circling the edges or feeding on the animals that gather below. The rivers on the ocean floor are shaped by similar forces. Brine flows through natural channels in the seafloor, moving slowly downhill in winding paths. These rivers carry chemicals instead of fresh water, and their movement creates small valleys and banks. The brine is thick enough that it hugs the contours of the ground, flowing as if it has weight beyond the surrounding sea. In some places, the rivers even carve small cascades or gentle drops where the terrain shifts. The water above them remains still, unaware that a separate current moves quietly below. The boundaries between these brine rivers and the surrounding seawater behave like invisible membranes. They allow gases to pass but resist mixing. The brine holds methane or hydrogen sulfide, feeding microbial communities that line the riverbanks. These microbes, in turn, support the mussels, worms, and other creatures that build entire ecosystems around the chemical energy rising from the brine. At night, or what would be night at the surface, the pools appear untouched in the darkness. Their surfaces reflect the faint glow of bioluminescent creatures passing overhead. A drifting jellyfish might leave a soft trail of light above the pool. A slow-moving fish might create ripples in the upper layer of water, its shadow bending slightly as it crosses the boundary. The pools hold a sense of stillness that feels ancient. They are places where life gathers, not for warmth or sunlight, but for chemistry and shelter. Each pool forms a small, isolated world. Its edges become homes to unique communities. Its surface marks a quiet tension between two kinds of water. The deep may appear vast and uniform, but here it reveals hidden landscapes shaped by forces that remain unseen until one drifts close enough to notice the shimmer. These underwater lakes and rivers show that even in the dark, even in the cold, the ocean builds its own landscapes. They are gentle reminders that the deep is not empty. It holds valleys and shorelines, currents and boundaries, and countless small worlds layered beneath the weight of the sea. Far beneath the calm surface of the sea, in regions where sunlight has never stirred the water, the earth continues to shape itself with quiet force. The crust shifts, tectonic plates push and pull, heat rises from deep inside the planet, moving slowly toward the cold ocean floor. Every so often, this buried heat breaks through, creating volcanoes that erupt not into air, but into darkness and pressure. These underwater eruptions happen beneath kilometers of water, hidden from the world above, yet powerful enough to reshape entire landscapes. The first sign of an underwater volcano is often a soft trembling in the seafloor. The ground swells as molten rock pushes upward. Then a crack opens, releasing heat and minerals into the cold surrounding water. At times, these events are gentle, with lava whispering upward in slow flows. Other times, the eruptions come with sudden bursts, sending clouds of ash and molten fragments into the water. Even here, where pressure is immense, The force of fire can create plumes that rise hundreds of meters before cooling. When the lava reaches the seawater, the meeting creates a clash of extremes. The molten rock arrives glowing hot, carrying temperatures high enough to melt metal. The water around it hovers near freezing. The moment they touch, a thin crust forms around the lava, cooling so quickly that it cracks into strange shapes. Some of these shapes stretch into small tubes known as pillow lavas. Others form sharp ridges or rounded lobes. All of them settle into new patterns across the seafloor, building ridges and mounds in slow layers. The water above an eruption becomes filled with tiny minerals and volcanic glass. These particles scatter the faint light from our instruments like dust floating through air, creating a swirling cloud that hangs in the water for hours or days. The heat rising from the fresh lava creates shimmering waves that distort the darkness. It feels as if the seafloor is breathing. In the immediate aftermath of an eruption, life struggles. Any animals living too close to the vent may not survive the sudden burst of heat. Microbial mats that once covered the rocks are swept away by the flow. Tube worms and clams anchored to the ground are buried. The area becomes a wasteland of cooling stone, coated with volcanic ash and scattered fragments of solidified lava. Yet this destruction does not last. The deep sea has its own form of renewal, shaped by the chemistry released from the Earth's interior. As the lava cools, gases and minerals seep from cracks in the fresh rock. Sulfur compounds flow outward in faint streams. Hydrogen and methane rise gently through the sediment. These substances form the foundation for new life, and microbes arrive first. The microbes begin to coat the cooling surfaces, thin at first, then thicker as they multiply. They grow by using the chemical energy escaping from the rock, just as their distant relatives do at hydrothermal vents and cold seeps. Their presence marks the beginning of recovery. Over time, the microbial films create a base for larger organisms. Small shrimp return, feeding on the microbes or the particles drifting near the vent. Worms move cautiously onto the new ground, settling into crevices where conditions are stable. Slowly, the area becomes familiar again to the creatures that rely on chemical energy for survival. Tube worms and clams are among the last to return, but they come in great numbers. Their larvae drift through the water until they sense chemicals rising from the new crust. When they detect these signals, they settle on the rock and begin to grow, forming colonies that cling to the edges of the warm flow. Their bodies depend on symbiotic microbes, which feed on the chemical energy released from the earth. As long as the volcanic vent continues to release these chemicals, the animals thrive. Years pass, and the once barren landscape becomes vibrant again. New forms of life settle into the cracks and indus ridges. Small crabs patrol the slopes. Fish move quietly through the mineral-rich water. Microbial layers thicken along the rocks. The volcanic land, once harsh and empty, becomes a rich ecosystem, fed not by sunlight, but by the deep heat of the planet. The cycle repeats whenever the Earth releases its fire. A volcanic eruption destroys, yet it also creates. The deep water cools the lava quickly, locking nutrients into the rock. Cracks open pathways for chemicals. Microbes transform those chemicals into energy. Animals follow the microbes, and new communities grow. Underwater volcanoes show that life in the deep is shaped by contrasts. Fire meets freezing water. Destruction becomes a beginning. A lifeless plain becomes a home once again. Even in the darkest parts of the sea, renewal unfolds quietly at the edge of heat and stone, guided by chemistry, patience, and the slow breath of the earth. The deep ocean often feels timeless, as though its quiet plains and drifting currents exist far beyond the reach of the surface world. Much of its life moves slowly, generations stretch across decades or centuries. Temperature changes barely register from one year to the next. Even light from the sun disappears long before it reaches these depths. For a long time, it seemed as if nothing from the surface could disturb this immense, ancient calm. Yet the deep is not separate from the rest of the planet. The ocean is one continuous body, carrying everything that happens above into the silence below. Over the past century, the surface has warmed, storms have shifted, and winds have strengthened. These changes ripple downward, sinking in slow spirals until they reach the world we have been exploring. Here, in the cold dark, the effects unfold gradually, but they leave marks that may last for hundreds or thousands of years. One of the clearest changes appears in the oxygen minimum zones that stretch through the midwater. These are regions where oxygen levels naturally drop to very low concentrations because bacteria and other microorganisms consume the oxygen as they break down drifting organic matter. For millions of years, these zones have been part of the ocean's design. Many animals avoid them. Others have adapted to their thin supply. But now, as the surface warms, these low oxygen zones begin to spread. Warm water holds less oxygen than cold water. As temperatures rise at the surface, oxygen stops dissolving as efficiently, creating layers that carry less and less of it. These layers sink over time. The minimum zones widen and deepen, squeezing the space where marine life can comfortably survive. Animals that once moved freely across large distances must now navigate around expanding regions of near suffocation. Some species retreat upward, others shift sideways through the ocean, searching for pockets of water rich enough in oxygen to sustain them. The deep, already a place of narrow margins and delicate balance, feels this quiet compression. Another change comes from carbon. Every day, carbon dioxide released into the atmosphere is absorbed by the surface of the ocean. Some of this carbon reacts with water to form acidic compounds. Some sinks into deeper layers through natural currents. Once there, it settles into the deep sea for long periods of time, locked away where sunlight and weather cannot reach it. But the rate at which carbon enters the ocean has increased dramatically. What once moved slowly now pours downward faster than the deep can fully absorb. This extra carbon makes the water slightly more acidic even at great depths. Though the change is small in number, it carries enormous consequences. Many deep-sea creatures rely on calcium carbonate to form shells and internal structures. Acidic water weakens these materials. Larvae that drift through the deep may struggle to form protective layers. Shell-building animals may thin over time. The changes happen slowly, but they accumulate, just as chemical signals travel through the dark to shape the movement of life. Heat, too, sinks downward, not quickly and not dramatically, but steadily. The deep ocean's temperature has remained near freezing for countless ages. Even a small increase has consequences. Some species depend on narrow temperature ranges. Certain chemical reactions inside their cells function best in precise conditions. A fraction of a degree can shift metabolic rates, breeding cycles, and patterns of movement. Deep water currents, which carry nutrients and oxygen through the ocean, are also influenced by changes in temperature and salinity at the surface. If these currents slow, the deep may receive less oxygen and fewer nutrients. Regions that once supported thriving microbial communities may weaken. Areas that relied on the steady fall of marine snow may see that snowfall shift, becoming lighter in some regions and heavier in others. These changes unfold at a pace that mirrors the slow rhythm of the deep. They do not arrive as storms or sudden disruptions. Instead, they enter quietly, carried through sinking layers of water and drifting chemical gradients. But their presence lingers. Once carbon settles into the deep, it can remain for centuries. Once heat enters the lower layers, it can take generations to move upward again. The deep absorbs these changes like a memory, storing them in slow-moving currents and sediments. Creatures that grow slowly or reproduce rarely face particular challenges. A fish that takes several decades to reach maturity may not adapt quickly to shifting oxygen levels. A coral that grows a few centimeters each year may struggle to rebuild after small disturbances. Even microbial worlds, which seem resilient and ancient, may adjust in ways that alter entire ecosystems. Still, the deep continues its quiet work. Life moves at its own pace. New conditions become part of the environment, shaping the zest, creatures that live there and guiding their evolution, just as darkness and pressure did long before. The deep sea has endured ice ages, shifting continents, and ancient climate shifts, each one leaving subtle traces in its sediments and water layers. Now, it begins to record the changes of our time. The marks are faint but spreading, carried through the ocean's vast interior. They remind us that the deep, though distant and silent, is woven tightly into the story of the planet. The deep ocean stretches before us like an unopened book, its pages turned only a handful of times in all of human history. For every trench we have mapped, there are countless others known only by faint outlines. For every creature we have filmed, there may be thousands drifting unseen. Exploring this silent world requires tools built with extraordinary care. It also requires patience, courage, and a willingness to work at the edge of what physics allows. The first challenge is simple to understand, but difficult to overcome. The pressure of the deep increases with every meter. At depths of several thousand meters, it becomes strong enough to crush steel. Light disappears long before that. Temperature drops to near freezing. Communication signals weaken. Navigation becomes uncertain. Machines must survive conditions that no human body can tolerate for long. Every dive is a balance of risk and careful engineering. To reach these depths, scientists rely on remotely operated vehicles, or ROVs. These machines are connected to research vessels by long, armored cables that carry power and signals. An ROV moves through the darkness with thrusters that push it gently across the seafloor. Cameras, lights, and robotic arms allow it to explore, collect samples, or take high-resolution images of life that might vanish at the slightest disturbance. An ROV does not feel pressure the way a human would, but even these machines are vulnerable. Their delicate sensors must be protected in strong housings. Their cables must endure tension from waves on the surface. Every movement must be deliberate. Working with an ROV feels almost like guiding a small, mechanical diver into another world. The crew on the ship watches the video feed, seeing the deep through the robot's unblinking eyes. Sometimes the screen fills with drifting snowflakes of sediment. Other times, a vast plain comes into view, dotted with creatures that exist nowhere else. The robot becomes the scientist's hands and senses in a place where human presence is fleeting. Autonomous underwater vehicles, or AUVs, take a different approach. Unlike ROVs, they have no tether. Scientists program them before the dive. Then, the machine slips quietly into the water and begins its mission alone. It may map an area with sonar, measure chemical gradients, or listen for faint sounds drifting through the deep. It navigates using onboard instruments, moving without direct human control. When the mission ends, it returns to the surface, where the crew retrieves it and downloads the data. AUVs travel farther than most ROVs. They can map entire underwater mountain ranges or search for new vents in regions where humans have never seen the seafloor, but their independence carries risk. If a current pushes an AUV off course, or if a sensor fails, the machine may not return. Its work relies on a delicate balance of trust and engineering. set against an environment that offers no second chances. Some parts of the deep are explored by crewed submersibles. Though these dives are rare and costly, the submersibles are built from materials strong enough to withstand pressures that would crush buildings. Their windows are made from thick acrylic, shaped in a way that distributes force evenly. Inside, the air remains at surface pressure. Scientists sit in narrow spaces, often shoulder to shoulder with the pilot, surrounded by instruments and controls. As the submersible descends, the water outside grows darker until the only light comes from small lamps fastened to the hull. The descent can take hours. The interior remains quiet. The view outside the window becomes a soft field of drifting particles. Then, slowly, the seafloor appears, illuminated by the submersible's beams. Crude dives offer something unique, something no camera can fully replicate. Seeing the deep with one's own eyes creates a connection that technology cannot fully replace. But each dive is an enormous undertaking. Weather must be calm. The sub must be inspected in detail. Support ships must be equipped with cranes and cables strong enough to lift the machine. And even with perfect preparation, the danger remains. A single failure at depth could be catastrophic. Because of this, deep dives happen infrequently. Some trenches have been visited only once or twice in all of history. Others have never seen a human-operated craft. Even ROV missions are rare. Research vessels are few, and each expedition requires careful planning. Storms, budgets, and shifting priorities shape when and where scientists can explore. It is often said that exploring the deep ocean is harder than exploring space. In many ways, this is true. Space is a vacuum that surrounds spacecraft evenly. The deep ocean is a place where pressure grows heavier with each passing moment. Space is dark, but signals travel through it easily. Underwater, communication struggles to move through dense layers of water, and while space may be vast, the deep is filled with rugged mountains, steep valleys, and landscapes that can entangle or crush a vehicle. Still, scientists continue to explore. They build stronger machines, they design new sensors, they map the seafloor inch by inch. Every dive adds a small piece to the puzzle of a world that remains mostly untouched. The deep asks for patience and respect, and in return, it offers glimpses into places that feel almost timeless, shaped by pressure, darkness, and mysteries that stretch far beyond the reach of ordinary sight. The deep ocean, with all its pressure and quiet darkness, often reveals its secrets only in passing. A camera catches a shape drifting through the frame, a light flickers in the distance. A shadow moves beyond the reach of a submersible's beams. Then the moment fades, and the ocean closes around the mystery once more. Some of these moments have become part of deep-sea lore, not because we fully understand them, but because they remain unanswered even after years of study. There are creatures recorded only a single time, seen briefly by a camera or an ROV, before disappearing from science entirely. One of the most memorable encounters happened during a remote expedition when a long, ribbon-like animal drifted past a submersible's window. It moved with gentle motions, bending and curling in the water. Its body seemed almost translucent. It bore no clear resemblance to known species of worms, jellies, or fish. Researchers captured the footage, replayed it hundreds of times, and compared it to existing records. Nothing matched. That creature has not been seen again, though the region has been visited several times since. Another example came from a deep-sea mission, where a camera caught a shape resembling a floating sheet, rippling like fabric in an unseen current. It drifted across the frame in silence, its edges folding and unfolding. Some believed it was a type of jellyfish. Others thought it might be a colonial organism, perhaps a siphonophore, or a relative of creatures that live in long chains. but no specimen was collected, and the sighting remains a mystery. Some encounters stretch even further from explanation. In certain regions of the midwater, cameras have captured animals that seem to lack clear boundaries between their parts. They look like clouds of tissue or clusters of cells held together loosely, drifting without form. These shapes appear alive, but scientists cannot yet determine whether they represent new species, unusual versions of known organisms, or simply living structures passing through a strange stage of development. Without physical samples, the questions remain suspended in the water, waiting for another chance encounter. Bioluminescent flashes add another layer of mystery. Deep-sea researchers often observe sudden pulses of light that appear without any visible organism nearby. These flashes can be small bursts or long, sweeping streaks that travel across the darkness. Sometimes they appear in colors rarely seen in bioluminescence, such as subtle purples or greenish hues that fade quickly. The flashes may come from creatures too small or too quick to capture on camera. They may also come from species that deliberately release light at a distance, using chemical clouds or drifting particles to send signals into the dark. There are records of rhythmic light pulses as well. Certain expeditions noted flashing patterns that repeated at steady intervals, moving across the field of view like slow signals. Scientists have proposed many ideas to explain them, including schools of fish, microbial light waves, or even chemical reactions triggered by passing currents. But the patterns were never linked to a specific biological source. They remain as soft impressions of something alive beyond the reach of our equipment. Unidentified species appear in unexpected places too. A few missions have captured images of creatures that resemble familiar animals, but with features that do not fit known families. A fish with fins shaped unlike anything documented. A crustacean with limbs that bend in directions no other species shares. A small, gelatinous animal with internal organs arranged in unfamiliar patterns. Each sighting opens a door to new questions about how life evolves in isolation and silence. Some cameras have even recorded organisms that seem almost too large or too unusual to belong to existing classifications. One sighting showed a long, thread-like creature extending across the frame far beyond what could be measured. Another recorded a massive, faint outline drifting in the distance, too large for the camera to capture in a single view. Whether these shapes belong to known animals or lineages that diverged long ago remains a quiet wonder. These mysteries hint at the possibility that the deep holds lineages we have not imagined. The ocean's trenches and plains are older than the human species. They have existed through eras of ice and warmth, through mass extinctions and long stretches of quiet change. Entire branches of life could have formed here, shaped by pressures and conditions unique to the deep. Some may have adapted to narrow environments, living out their lives in regions hardly ever visited by our instruments. Others may drift freely, appearing only when chance brings a camera close enough. The vastness of the deep ensures that much remains unseen. Each expedition covers only a small area, often just a few meters wide. The ocean, by contrast, stretches into countless valleys, ridges, and plains. For every discovery, there are many more waiting. The creatures recorded only once may be part of thriving, hidden populations. The flashes of light may be signals from animals we have yet to study. The unidentified shapes may belong to families that branched away from known species millions of years ago. In the deep, mysteries do not vanish. They settle gently into the water, becoming part of the quiet story of a world still mostly unknown. The journey through the deep has carried us far from the surface world we know. It has taken us past fading light, through drifting layers of life, across plains shaped by darkness, and into realms warmed by the earth itself. Down here, where pressure settles like quiet weight and time stretches into long, unbroken lines, the ocean reveals itself as one of Earth's last living frontiers. Not empty, not silent, not barren, but alive in ways that feel both mysterious and delicate. The deep sea holds more unknowns than any landscape on land. Its vast spaces remain mostly untouched, its mountains unmapped, its valleys unseen by human eyes. Even with all we have explored, it remains a frontier that changes slowly, patiently, without notice. It invites discovery, but only in small glimpses. A drifting shadow, a faint glow, a shape caught by chance in a camera frame. These moments remind us that the deep is not a static place. It shifts and grows. It shelters life that continues to adapt, generation after generation, to an environment shaped by extremes. The strangeness we found here is not the strangeness of fantasy, it is the strangeness of possibility. Bodies that bend without breaking, bones that soften, muscles that shimmer, lights that bloom from within. These traits are real expressions of life's ability to change and endure. When sunlight disappears, life finds another source of energy. When pressure rises, life finds ways to soften its structures. When food becomes scarce, life stretches its limits. The deep sea becomes a testament to adaptability, a quiet echo of Earth's long history of transformation. Every creature we encountered carries the imprint of that patience. The slow-growing clams of the cold seeps, the drifting jellies that feed on gentle currents, the immense squid that travel through the midwater, the tiny predators that hunt with nothing more than faint vibrations, even the microbes at hydrothermal vents, thriving where heat and chemicals rise from within the planet, show that life finds footholds in the most unlikely places. Their existence tells a story older than mountains, older than forests, perhaps older than the first sunlight that touched Earth's early oceans. These forms of life remind us that the deep is not separate from us. It shapes the world above in ways we rarely notice. It stores heat. It moves currents that guide weather. It holds carbon that would otherwise fill the air. It protects species that may one day reveal insights into biology, chemistry, or even the origins of life. The deep sea is a living part of our planet's balance, a quiet engine working far below the surface. As we drift through these final moments in the dark, it becomes clear that we have seen only a fraction of what exists. The trenches stretch deeper than our tools can easily reach. The plains extend farther than any camera can scan. Entire ecosystems remain unseen, built from species that light has never touched. The mysteries we found, from strange glowing flashes to creatures glimpsed only once, remind us that the unknown still surrounds us. For all our exploration, our understanding is still young, and perhaps that is part of the wonder. The deep does not reveal itself all at once. It offers small stories, gentle clues, quiet shapes. It leaves room for curiosity. It invites us to imagine what might live in the places our machines have not yet reached. It encourages us to listen closely, to observe patiently, to explore without expecting easy answers. In this final stretch of our journey, let the darkness feel spacious instead of empty. Let the silence feel calm instead of distant. The deep sea continues to breathe in its slow, steady rhythm. It continues to create life that bends around pressure, thrives without sunlight, and carries ancient memories within its cells. We leave this world in the same soft way we entered it, knowing that much remains beyond our view. The deep will continue to unfold its quiet stories in its own time. And somewhere far below, beneath layers of water that stretch farther than imagination, life will keep shimmering gently in the dark.